Because you're not used to sitting down here in the dinner table seats. Good evening.
And welcome to the...
You have to hit your microphones gently to make the red light go on, because otherwise you're not on. Okay, Joan, take it away.
Welcome to the November 9th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we're going to talk about the vision of Issaquah, what we want it to look like in the future. And you might notice that there are several additional people around this table. And they are part of the task force that originally spent 2 or 3 years, many hours, putting together what we all think has positives for the city. So we're not here to change it. We're just here to see if we have to make any updates or based on what has happened in the last 2 years. So we are not here to tell you people that you did not do a good job and to start all over. We certainly do not want to start all over. So that's what we're planning to do tonight. The first thing on our agenda is always the approval of the minutes. So do I have a...
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from October 26th.
Second.
Any discussion? Any changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
With that, we will go right into Trish's presentation of what we should be looking at and what our plans are for the future.
Okay. Since there's so many new PPC members, would it be helpful for our Rockstar Task Force members to introduce themselves? Because I sure am really glad.
I think it goes both ways. I don't think that everybody on PPC knows these gentlemen.
Right. Well, that's what I thought, so that everyone could know to whom they are talking with. Because and we can start with Ken.
Okay. On the microphone?
Yeah. Gently tap.
Ken Koenigsmark. I've lived in Issaquah since 1984 when it was a one-stoplight town at Front and Sunset, so lots of changes. Been involved in a lot of the activities related to growth management and the developments, including Issaquah Highlands and Talus particularly. I'm on the board of the Issaquah Alps Trails Club and the Mountains to Sound Greenway and several others, so I come from an environmental and conservation bent.
I'm Mel Morgan. I've served on the Development Commission for a couple of decades and been served on the Central Area Task Force as well.
I'm Joe Forkner. I was the chair of the task force and done pretty much everything there is to do in Issaquah at some level or another.
You want to do PPP
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
I'm Lindsay Walsh. This is my first year.
You need a microphone. You need to share.
I'm Lindsay Walsh, and this is my first year on PPC.
I'm Ron Fall, and I'm the vice chair on PPC.
I'm Joan Probola, and I have the pleasure of serving as chair this year for PPC.
Well done.
I'm AJ Magali. I'm an alternate for PPC. Moved here just last year. Lived in Bellevue very, very briefly before that, before moving here from out of state.
And I'm Mary Lynch, and I also was part of the Citizens Task Force and lived here over 30 years.
Great.
I'm Althea Soldano, and I have lived in Issaquah for 10 years, and I'm an alternate on PPC.
I'm John Staub. I've been on PPC for 2 years now and lived in Issaquah for the same amount of time. So,
Great.
Carl Swedberg, and I've been on PPC for 16 years.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you all. And I noticed we have John from the Grange here, who was in one of our focus groups, many focus groups that we had for property owners and businesses in the central area. And also we had open houses, 2 open houses to get the more public flavor as well. So thanks, John, for being here tonight. So in your packet, we briefly described sort of how we wanted to go through things. And it's a little different, perhaps, than we've done some of our moratorium projects in the past, this past year, because it has been a busy one. As I said, we had some we started with a great open house with you all before the new members came on board, which is unfortunate, but we wanted to start as soon as we could. And then we took it to the business owners and property owners, and then we had some focus groups out in the community, one at Atlas and one at the barn. And so we took all that public comment and the existing visions and the new visions, what we thought of, and some strategies, and we gave it to the council last month for their informal review. And it just wasn't exactly what they had wanted. And so we thought we'd take a step back with you all and give you the existing conditions, what's there now, take you on some tours because we know some of you are real new, and just to sort of give you the flavor of what's out there, and then start building the new visions from the ground up again, because maybe that would be a better tact. So the first part of tonight, we want to talk about the purpose of a vision. Why do we even need visions for long range for our areas? And some of the issues that Central has faced since it's been adopted, and things that it will face in the future to kind of get us all geared up for why do we need a good vision. And then the second half of the meeting, we're hoping to actually start to throw out some bigger ideas for each of the visions, to start thinking about what the vision, what the future will be. I don't know if we can get through all 10 tonight, maybe not, but then there's always the November 30th meeting too that we can continue our work, and we're hoping that some of the task force members can come back that night as well if possible. So with that, again, this is the expectations. We're even going to try and keep the first set of questions to an hour and the second set for an hour, and then hear public comments, so we're not here till midnight, because those are never very fun meetings. It would be good if it was a movie. And the outcome, we hope, is that we understand why we need a vision, that we understand what's changed since adoption, and how maybe better we can figure out how to react now so that we're ready for the future, and then have clear direction on the boundaries of the districts. Is 10 enough? Is 10 too many? Does 10 make sense? Is some of the questions that we heard. So why was it a moratorium item for the council? This was a big one. Is there something missing that caused us to get development that maybe we didn't think we were going to get? To fix that, do we need to add some more details? Do we need to have more pictures? Do we need to have maps with specific placeholders for things? What kinds of criteria can we use to get a better vision that helps us have a better set of standards to get us where we want to go for the future? And the council, when they set this as a moratorium item, they gave us some new criteria to evaluate as well. One is architectural style. They wanted the green necklace to actually be pulled out of the environmental piece so it would stand alone, because they thought it was that important that it should stand alone. And placemaking, so that each of the neighborhoods has its own place where the public would gather there and the neighbors and business people could gather, that would be their own unique feature in the neighborhood. And they also thought we should check the boundaries, that maybe the boundaries don't make sense. The purpose of having a vision, it's to be aspirational, it's to be exciting, it's to be inspiring, it's to be possible. Certainly there are visions that are impossible. We don't want those. We want them to be able to be implemented. We want them to anticipate the jobs and housing balance to work for us, and not to harm our economics or harm our sense of place. So visions, sometimes they're touchy-feely, but if we can get them right, you can monitor them, you can measure them to see if you're making a successful, if you're successful or not, and we have some ideas on that at the end to how to make them more measurable. Are there questions about why? So what's happened since 2013, since we adopted the vision? Well, the first thing was Atlas happened just outside the urban core. They weren't required to have mixed use. They weren't required to have affordable housing because they were right outside the line of the urban core. So that caused us to ponder. Maybe our regulations didn't go far enough. Maybe we should have had more requirements that were more central-wide instead of just the urban core. So that was one of the first developments. Gateway happened. It all went residential. Even though we wanted mixed use, we didn't require mixed use. And so residential was the hot market. Residential is what we got. The Costco development agreement came in. We think that was a good thing. It's a known quantity of what we're going to get in that area over the next 20 to 25 years. We annexed the state park. That's a really good thing. We have 2 new hotels. We're in Sound Transit 3, so there's light rail approved for Issaquah. That's pretty exciting. The Metro Connects is adopted. That's all the new regional bus routes that many of them come to Issaquah. There's a new 62nd Street that's under construction. If you've been near Costco or near our offices, there's beautiful construction going on. We have a TOD project that's in the works that we're going to have a presentation on one of these days when our agendas aren't quite so packed. But that is proposed to go right near the transit center, and that's transit-oriented development that includes mixed use, affordable housing, an array of many wonderful land uses that we're excited about. And we now have an ordinance about how to regulate compact schools so that you can get more of a school on a smaller parcel. So these are all things that we've done and you've helped with since the adoption of the central plan and standards in 2013. So what might happen in the next 10 to 20 years? And these are just the ones we know about. There's probably a lot out there, of course, that we don't even know are going to happen to Issaquah. The schools they have to develop now. They have the money. They need to find the sites. The Costco development is going to start building out. The light rail planning that we have to do as a community. We have to figure out the Gilman Boulevard vision, the plan and reconstruction. There's been a lot of talk of how should it look like? Does it look different to the east versus to the west? That's going to be really big in this community. Newport Way is going to go under reconstruction. We're working with the state park to change some of the things that they do and how they do it in their development agreement. The Mall Street extension, I mean, there's just all sorts of things that are coming online that are going to affect Central Issaquah in the next, in fact, Ron brought up one last night at the tour. Is retail going to change in the next 10 to 20 years? I mean, we might not go to stores as much as we do. You know, that's fabulous. Something to think about is our whole concept of daily services. Question? Thought?
Can you highlight which of these is like definitely going to happen and which of these like is more planned but doesn't necessarily funny? Like the overcrossing, like the city really wants that to happen, but we still got to shake up millions of dollars for that, versus some of these are kind of more guaranteed and in process.
So overcrossing is not a set thing.
Okay.
It's a crossing. It will happen.
Oh, but it might not be over?
It's probably not over, actually.
Oops.
I just mean, like, can you go through these one by one and say, kind of differentiate between like the schools, the school districts,
yes.
like that will definitely happen. There will be schools somewhere.
Yes. Light rail, yes. Gilman Boulevard, yes. Newport Way, yes. State Park, yes. Mall Street, I'm saying yes, right? Mall Street, yes. I-90 crossing, maybe not over, but crossing, yes.
Not at 12.
And okay. I-90 Maple Crossing, yes. Front Street with the state, that's got to be a yes. Yes. Parks Plan, yes. Bike share, I'm going to say yes. We're working with other jurisdictions, and it's slower than we thought, but it's got to happen within the next 10 years.
Okay. So you guys feel pretty confident that all of these will happen in some form?
Yes. Good question, though. Any other questions on influences? Okay. Oops, we're going backwards. These are the 10 neighborhoods. I wanted to show this slide before we dove in, just so you can see how they're organized now. There's 10. They were pretty fun on the tour because it was very dark, very fast. So it was.
Trish, quick question. So I see some blue lines on there that are obviously not creeks. What are those? Are those parcel?
The blue lines I see are water.
Well, like between
Are there different blue
Tibbetts
lines?
Valley and Gilman, we've got
I think that's called a tributary.
I think they're culverts.
it's a culvert.
They don't
Storm water, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't meander because they've been man-shaped.
All right.
They're in a ditch pipe sort of a
I was
situation.
curious because they're just too straight.
They are very straight. We have some very straight creeks in our town. Other questions about the neighborhoods?
Can you go back to the previous page again? Sorry. Can you give a quick 1 minute, what's the Lake Sammamish Park Development Agreement? That's the first time I've heard of that.
I only know one.
I don't want to sidetrack us, but that one I had
that's
never heard of before.
So some of these things are better defined at this point than others. What is going on right this moment is the city got a request from state parks to work on a development agreement and an EIS for Lake Sammamish State Park. And it came with an ask to partner with them on a development agreement, but it also came with an ask to help them fund the EIS. So council at Land and Shore Committee last week heard an agenda bill, heard presentation from staff and state park staff, and agreed to move that agenda bill back to full council with the idea that if full council approves it, that money ask to partner with state parks would go into the 2018 budget. The development agreement has identified a number of possibilities. It includes things like moving the entrance of the state park from where it is now to closer to the interchange of 12th and 56th. It's looking at doing things like a kind of a natural, kind of an eco center. So there's a lot of things from the existing master plan, which was done in 2007, that there's an opportunity to kind of vet that and evolve that. But then there's also an opportunity to look at some other things, like possibly taking the existing grass soccer fields and turning them into all-weather fields and making that more of kind of a tournament destination space because there's enough land to do that. And so if we go down this path, there'll be plenty of community outreach opportunities to talk about kind of the scoping of what all we include in both the development agreement and the EIS. But that's going on right now, and the first step is for council to agree to help fund the EIS, because if we don't help them fund that, it will not happen because they don't have enough money in their budget to do that by themselves.
Great. That was more than enough information. Thanks, Keith.
Any other thoughts on this? And the reason the state park is so important is it's the whole northern boundary of Central, so it affects several of the neighborhoods.
So I had one thought on the neighborhood shape. Thinking through this after I went to the Newport Way open house on that rebuild.
Oh, great.
That, when you think of how Newport Way looks when you get west of 90, it's very much trying to be the central part of the neighborhood, whereas on these maps, it's instead being treated as a border. Mm-hmm. So maybe throwing that out for discussion, because like 900 makes sense as a border between neighborhoods. It very much is a dividing wall, very much as like I-90 is. So I'm wondering whether or not, if you want to frame Western Gateway correctly, do you want to also include the other side of the street? But I know at that point you get out of Central Issaquah. I'm just throwing that out there, because I'm just thinking of how the architects sold the Newport Way rebuild in terms of making that very much the center of that part of Issaquah.
So I'm just going to add to that, because you've opened one of the doors that we want to talk about, and that's boundaries.
Yeah.
So that's boundary here. As Trish mentioned, Lake Sammamish State Park is not in Central Issaquah because it was actually not in the city when this plan was done, so it didn't make sense to include it. That would be one question about boundary changes, is does the state park want to be in Central Issaquah or not? We also talked about kind of this area down here at the southeast corner of the Gilman neighborhood, and whether or not that makes sense to be in Central Issaquah, or does that feel more like Old Town? And so from a boundary discussion perspective, I think there's at least a short list, and you guys might have some other suggestions for what to put on the list or not, but I think those are some of the conversations we want to have.
Are we having that now, or should I hold that till later? I'm just thinking from an agenda standpoint, I don't want to derail too early.
No, it's part of the discussion, so you could certainly start it. We have the slides on that at the end, but.
Okay, I'll hold off if we got slides in it later.
But it's all good.
When were you wanting to do a specific charting thing? I mean, you want me to write that on our sideways chart?
We're going to do the sideways chart when we actually start doing bold ideas for the divisions.
Okay.
But thanks for asking.
Sure. They get the script.
Yes. So this is the last, I think this is the last of the questions that we put in your packet is what does success look like for the visions? When we're done with them, how will we sort of backfill to make sure that these are better perhaps than the ones that we have? And one of them was that you can read it and visualize what the future is going to be. And although we thought that's what the old visions did, apparently we didn't really nail it. The second one is that it's specific enough to guide development and the design standards. And the example I use for that is for Atlas and Gateway, if we really wanted mixed use in those areas, we should have actually had the standards require mixed use instead of being aspirational, saying it would be great to actually say, if you're developing here, you have to have 2 or more uses. I mean, that it's something that is specific enough to translate into exactly what you want. And the third one is if there's uncertainty in the standards, that you can go back to the vision and you can understand which way the standards were supposed to go. And that's easier, again, that could be used for the Atlas and mixed use question. Also, when the development actually occurs, that it reflects what was in the vision. Sort of looking back that, yeah, that's what we wanted, that's what we got, kind of a thought. Any questions on?
So one thing to add to this, whenever you do vision for subsets of a whole, you have to keep the alignment to the whole. So what is the vision for Issaquah? And everything has to tie back to that, because if it doesn't, then it's pointless developing separate visions.
Tim?
I would agree with that as well, that what I saw lacking and what I got delivered was an overall vision. I mentioned this to Keith. It's like we've got 10 different puzzle pieces, but what's the picture that the puzzle creates when those pieces come together? Is it the devil or is it Madonna, as I said to Keith? We got to make it Madonna, I think. Within that vision then, I think it's got to get more than what the second bullet says. It isn't, is the vision specific enough? It's, is the vision, city policies and city codes and regulations, are those enough to guide development? It can't just be a vision. It's got to be backed up by regulations, codes, policies, hammer. Otherwise, you're not going to get the vision.
Because having sat through the Gateway and the Riva and those discussions, as Mel has also, is like with Riva, we never envisioned out there with Gateway, I don't believe, having 0 lot lines. When we decided on our task force, we were thinking to keep it more in line with the neighborhoods that were out there. But when the development standards for the central area plan were done, it was included all the areas. And so now Riva's apartments will be 0 lot line to Newport Way.
Right.
Because of the design codes that were allowed to happen with this. So I think in some of these, when we're talking about the individual areas, you also need to make sure that they get implemented through the codes and policies the way you want, versus having the 0 lot line on a major street.
Right. Right.
So,
Good point.
Trish, one of the things one of the earlier slides said is a vision is not standards or code.
Right.
So I think it's important to understand who that someone is that's in this first bullet point here, so that we can understand, okay, is the vision put forth so that City Council or whatever other committee is pulling together the standards and the code, uses it to create those?
Right.
Or is it more toward a developer who is going to read this and go, oh, that was the ideas, let's see if I can develop something that meets that?
Right, and I think it has to be all of the above.
And we need to keep those users in mind when we're creating this so that we can answer their questions.
Right, right. Good point.
I do have to say that, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Ken. You have to start with the whole, though. You start with the whole, and then you break it down into the different pieces. When I was looking at it, it concerned me that I didn't know how those boundaries were created, because I don't know what the entire vision is. And so creating subsets, it made no sense to me, because I couldn't figure out how those subsets came
Right,
about.
right. Good question, and that started from, how many years I'll say 5 years that we worked on Central. It was to meet the next round of growth targets from the state, which is why we never thought that the state park or environmental areas that should be in there, because the purpose of the central plan was to meet the growth targets for jobs and housing. So to put something like the state park in there would have diluted the land, because we knew, we can't put jobs and housing in the state park, and yet it would have given us a huge more acreage to work with. And so that for us in the planning, that's not what our point was. Our point was we need an area that's not an existing neighborhood to put the new growth, because we didn't want it on the hillsides. We didn't want it in South Cove. We didn't want it in any established neighborhoods. We wanted a new area that wouldn't displace any neighborhoods to put the new growth. And so that's where the boundary came up with. There were only 700 units in there at the time we did this. And this would be able to handle the 2006 to 2031 state growth targets that we had to meet. So that's where the boundary came from. And then we worked out the internal boundaries to see if each of the neighborhoods had its own flavor, had its distinct jobs housing balance, or some of them have better parks and trail systems. Some of them are a service area, for example, down where the shop and some of our industrial areas are. But the short answer is the main reason that we made the boundary this way was to meet the state growth targets for jobs and housing.
Joe?
Yes.
I think there's a couple things we need to point out. The task force came to the conclusion, not everybody agreeing, but I think we came to the conclusion that the policy of going through this was because we needed to accept a lot of growth. We didn't want to put it on the hillsides, and we decided the only way we were going to get that growth in Issaquah, which was required by the state, was to have more urban standards. So the vision, while it was just a very, very narrow vision, it was we're going to become an urban city rather than a suburban city. And I think that's what drove most of this. Mm-hmm. The other thing to keep in mind is at the time that we were going through all of this, Bellevue was developing, Redmond was developing, Kirkland was developing, Issaquah was stagnant. Nobody wanted to do anything here. We were trying to figure out ways we could get people to come here and develop. So what happened was once the CIP was done, it just kind of caught everybody off guard. This was a 30-year plan, and what was supposed to happen over 30 years happened within 10 years. And that's what caught everybody off guard. We all sat there and said, well, we don't need to worry about making these regulations so strict, because we're not having anybody come to us now with no restrictions. So if we make them real strict, we're not going to be able to meet our growth targets. So as we go through this process now, as a city, I think we need to look at those things and say the same thing. What's important for the city? Affordable housing was one of the things that we put a lot of effort into. We tried to do incentives. We came up with all ideas. You still have to get from a task force or a commission through the city council. And I'm not criticizing anybody, I'm just pointing out a lot of what the task force did got lost from task force to implementation. And some of the things that got lost were very critical things to the success of how this could have worked. And I think that's one of the things the Planning Policy Commission needs to look at now as we move forward so that those things don't get lost again.
Trish, did the task force come up with a written vision, or is it just a, more urban, more this, more that? Was there a
They actually
specific
came up with-
statement that you can?
They came up with a plan that had actually standards in it. They worked so hard and for so long that they actually came up with a hybrid that, because they weren't satisfied with just the policies. To your credit, they actually put the standards with it so that there was no question about what they thought was the best for the
But
central area.
that's not the vision.
But that's not what got adopted. What got adopted was just the vision plan document, and then the standards came after. But I'd have to look back to see how
No, I
you
can
guys
read it
did
for
the
you.
vision.
Well,
It's very short.
I think that, when you talk about this, you're talking about the vision, we're going to do all these things, but it would be nice to see a vision there so that we can say, yeah, that one meets the vision.
Right,
And
'cause
so,
they're-
I don't know what you guys was the
It's like
specific-
2 sentences, I'll just read it
And
very
that's-
quickly. Central Issaquah vision, guide the evolution of Central Issaquah from a place known primarily for strip malls and office buildings into a closely aligned series of mixed-use neighborhoods that create and maintain an exceptional quality of life for Issaquah residents. And then subcategories of that vision included environment with goals, urban community with goals, mobility and connectivity with goals, and economic vitality. So it's laid out pretty well. And then each neighborhood at the time had a vision as well.
Right.
But within that
And that
vision,
part
I'm going to
got-
go
and
one
that
step
part got
further, just
adopted.
quickly. There were a couple key points. Part of the vision was that 90% of the valley floor right now was impervious surface. And we said, even as we densify and grow, we've got to improve upon that. We can't let 90% of the valley floor be impervious surface. And that was a key element of the vision. Second key element, that the glue that held everything together, was the concept of a green necklace, an inner trail system, so that every resident, even in dense urban neighborhoods, would have nature at your doorstep or transit ability, easy access to transit, connecting to the outer green necklace of Cougar, Squawk, Tiger, and Grand Ridge, so that every citizen could walk from their condo, apartment, home on the inner link, the inner green necklace, or up to the mountains, and enjoy the lifestyle that defines Issaquah compared to any other community in this area. That was the goal.
And for those of you that haven't read the central plan vision in a while, this is it in the plan. They're on our website, but it started out with the overarching that has what Ken talked about is the strip malls and office buildings to turn that into cohesive neighborhoods. And it had, the guiding principles were the environment, housing, sense of community, transportation and essential services, economic vitality, and innovation. That was the overarching for all of Central. And then each of them, each district had its own that had some existing conditions in it.
Now, too, that what Ken had, what we had put together, where it talked about, Tricia, if you scroll up to the vision itself, and strip malls and office buildings into what we had come up with where was that? Into a closely aligned series of mixed-use neighborhoods that create and maintain exceptional quality. And it's interesting, they got changed from a series of neighborhoods to a more cohesive neighborhood. So vision-wise, when it came to the plan, it was just one neighborhood, at least in what got changed by the time it went through council, so.
Right.
In terms of talking about, do we need 10 neighborhoods?
10 or 1, right.
Or fewer, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Trish, what exact document was given to City Council or was presented to City Council that they said, this isn't meeting our idea of what the neighborhood stuff would be revamped for the moratorium?
You mean recently, like last month? I don't know if we take that out of our hat. It had the new, it had what it is now, it had what it would be in the future, it had implementation strategies on how to get there. It was sort of a three-part piece
So
for
it
each
wasn't
of
what
for
the
each of
original task force had done.
Correct.
It
was all new.
was
It was
something that,
It was the evolution of,
and was that based on PPC's work or based on administration work?
It was the open house that you all had in March. It was the focus groups with the property owners and business owners. It was the 2 outreach meetings at Atlas and at the barn. And then we whooshed it all together and tried to figure out what it was telling us about what the community wanted for the future.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up is because I'm not sure whether city council and generally people are having more problem with the presentation and the way the information was conveyed, so that it was clear, concise, descriptive, et cetera, or whether it's because they didn't like the content. The content didn't meet their needs. And so
Yeah.
I think that ultimately is the big question that needs to be answered before we try and come up with a document that satisfies that.
Well, in my humble opinion, if you all get a document that you're happy with, then you help us go to the council and say, we felt strongly that this is what Central needs to get through the next 10 to 20 years, as well as?
Just let me add something. So I think, so to be clear, and we can put the documents that we shared with council committee, if we didn't want you guys to start with something, we wanted you guys to start with a clean slate. You know, what I heard was that some of the neighborhoods, there's some clarity on what they're going to be. For example, Pickering, you know, you've got, we talked about this a little bit on the tour last night. You know, Pickering, you've got Costco and Costco's continual kind of increase in space as the driver for that neighborhood. And so talking about what's going to happen in Pickering, it's pretty easy to have a conversation about that. You go over the other side of the freeway and you go to Gilman neighborhood or Tibbetts Valley. Likewise, I think, you know, there's enough that we know about landowners and about things that are going on that you can have a pretty concise conversation about, well, what's that going to look like in 10 years or 20 years? And that's just going to depend on market, not on other variabilities. But then you get to some of the other neighborhoods and it gets a little bit squishier. You know, like Lake Sammamish neighborhood, which right now is 3 office buildings, a mini storage, a motel, and an IHOP and a gas station. You know, okay, what is that? What's it going to be 20 years from now? Maybe it's the same thing. And if the vision says that's what it is and that's great, maybe that's what the vision should say. So these are the conversations we need to have when we get down to that grain of detail. But I don't know that an expectation that every neighborhood, assuming there's still 10 at the end of the day, is going to be mixed use and Belltown. It's just not going to be. And I think this is part of the conversation we need to have. So that's what I've heard. Now, understand, this has only seen a conversation with 3 council members. Because it's really been, even though we did a presentation at a COW, the Committee of the Whole, really this level of conversation only happened at Land and Shore, which is 3 council members and not the whole 7. So part of what we want to get out of this is you guys and us kind of getting to a point where we think, all right, you know what? Either the visions are great the way they are, don't touch them, or we go through a process here where we change them, and then we bring something forward to the council and say, you may not completely understand these or even agree with these, but we as staff and the community feel like this is where these need to go. With that level of buy-in, I think we'll get the council to agree to adopt the revisions to the visions. Whew. So we can start wherever you want to, Lindsay. If you want to start with looking at what an example of what we shared with the committee, we can do that, or we can continue to have this conversation and kind of flow through some of the discussion points. Candidly, what I would say is some of it was actual verbiage, so some of the words that we put in some of those documents needed to be wordsmithed a bit. But it was really more philosophical, I think, is kind of the wall we hit at committee.
I think one of the reasons of the moratorium is because council and probably the rest of the community wasn't content with what was happening. And so I think what the council wants is a more definite how we're going to get to where we're going to get to and what specifics is it that we want to get to. So instead of going through all this other stuff, why don't we start with each one of the 10 to see if it works, what it is, so people understand what's in it. And I know that some of the committee members are at a loss because they did not go over the tour yesterday, and I think that once they do that, it's going to make it a lot more alive to them so that they're going to be able to see it a little bit better. So can we...
Can I point out one more thing?
Sure.
I know some of the task force members will disagree with me, but Atlas was not completely against the CIP. CIP looked at using Atlas, maybe not in that location, but Atlas as what the CIP was going to give us. One of the things that really, colors aside, one of the things that really hit the community was we don't want that here. We're not ready for that here. And I think I have to agree with Lindsay. I think you better look at what do you want the future here to look like and what do you want that timing to be. A lot of people live here because it isn't downtown Bellevue. And what CIP is doing is saying we're going to make Issaquah more like downtown Bellevue because we want to conserve the area between here and the mountain as what it is. And the people that would move in there and build houses along the freeway should move here where the services are and the transportation and stuff are instead of moving out there. And I think that's the bigger decision that the whole city needs to look at. Are we ready for Atlas and the other growth that's coming? Because that isn't contrary to the CIP. It's just we didn't have the regulations in place to make it exactly what the CIP should be.
If we were going to go through the 10 different neighborhoods, can I offer one prior suggestion maybe before? Because I asked Trish, she asked to send questions in advance, and what I wanted to know is, if we had this vision and this plan, what went wrong on Atlas and Gateway? Why did those happen? And where are the gaps? How, and not to blame anybody and not even to criticize, just how do we do better going forward? What went wrong in those developments happening that allowed that to happen? And how do we then, and then 10 neighborhoods as we go through those, make sure we don't end up with that again?
Well, I think the main reason they happened was because we didn't have the codes written and the requirements specific for the city to say, no, you can't do that because of this, because it's in writing and we've agreed to it. And I'm hoping that by going through and finding each one what you really need, you're going to come up with, the city's going to come up with those codes. So, yeah.
That should be the outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think that's what the city council wants. That's what the moratorium was. You know, we don't want this. What's going to happen? And I think the second thing of that is people of the community have to understand where you're going or what the city is planning. And they can't just wake up one morning and there's a 12-story building in the middle of somewhere. They have to know what's going to be around it and why it's there and how it's going to be handled. So.
I'm going to watch the last meeting on the Land and Shores, but I would like to understand what was Land and Shores' objections. And itemize them like 5 bullets. What was their objections and how can we work with those objections and maybe use those to guide us through? Because they obviously they've highlighted certain areas and
Right.
said, this is not acceptable. So what are those?
I think, and I'm not putting words in their mouth, but I feel very blessed to be a long-range planner because I think about many, many years all the time. I mean, that's how my brain works. But most people think about planning a vacation, planning a wedding, planning an event, which is like a year out, maybe. And so that's as far as a lot of folks can think. And so when you say 5 years, or you say 10 years, and people just, and I think, and again, not putting words in their mouth, I think they were having troubles thinking that far ahead with words and pictures. And it was hard for them to really see what would happen out there based on words and pictures. Because again, as Ken said, there's no code yet. We have implementation strategies that would help us get to the vision. But we don't have those now. We just know what they're going to be in order to strengthen the vision to make it happen. And I think that's the struggle that they were having, is there were words and pictures and things we were going to do, but the whole package wasn't there for them to see. And I think if we would have said, well, what if we have somebody that just came in the door in the permit center and said, I do want to do that use there. Would that make you go, wow, you mean really we could get that? Because I think there was the feeling of, would we ever even get that? Are they impossible? Like you mentioned in the tour, are some of the visions impossible? Well, we don't think they are. But we think they can happen. And so I think that was the hardest part for them, was to think out 20 years or even 10 years to these things happening, to more neighborhoods having the trails and the ways to get around that's not just a car, because that's a budget item. It's it has to get into the parks plan. There's pieces, there's ways that you have to get there. But when you think of Old Town, when we did Old Town 20 years ago, we wanted a big park. Now we have Confluence. We wanted more community buildings downtown. We have the community center. We have the library now. We have improvements to the fish hatchery. I mean, so many things in Old Town came true because we made the vision and we just started pounding through the budget items, through the work plan items, and a lot of really great things happened for Old Town. And we think the same can happen for Central.
So Trish, with that, what you just explained is a wish list of items. I think that should be in the visions for each district or neighborhood. A wish list of what should be there.
Right.
And then I also think each neighborhood and at a high level, we should have a success checklist. What does success look like? If we get these things, this is successful. And also an implementation checklist. This district or these neighborhood visions will not work unless these things are done, which includes standards and codes.
Right.
And so I think
that's
we
good.
clarify those things. That tells City Council, here's the actions that need to be taken. Here's how we're going to measure this. Here's what success looks like.
So,
that.
Can I clarify? In terms of vision statements, it's never a wish list. What it is a picture of the future. It's like the Microsoft, a computer on every desktop, right? It's that kind of picture. And how you get there has to be planned through. That's where you do short-term goals and long-term goals. And so actually I was going to suggest that whenever you do vision for different teams, different commissions, for any purpose, you need a really experienced facilitator, because it seems like they're checklists or they're just lists of stuff to do. And that is really not what a vision is. A vision is designed to be something aspirational, as you had on that list, but it's a vision of the future. What is this going to look like, 20 years from now? And right now, that Central Issaquah vision is not really a vision. It's just a bunch of stuff. And that's not really what we're trying to do. We have a vision of what the city should look like, right? Or we want to pull that out of people. And so honestly, I'm thinking, 10 neighborhoods and this group in a short period of time, it's really not doable, in my opinion. I think you need working sessions to get to that place, and working sessions like brainstorming type working sessions. That's just my
Right. Well, we're going to start brainstorming in a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, good thoughts.
You know, as we're baking this, we've been talking a lot about the growth. 7,000 is kind of a target. And I think the reality is if built out to capacity, we could be looking at something far larger than 7,000. We look out 20 years from now, it's entirely possible we could fit the entire population of Issaquah in Pickering. So I think from a vision standpoint, we need to look much larger than we're looking now and making sure that we have the infrastructure to support a much larger population, because the reality is, I think we will get it.
To get to the,
I got to mention, as I was pointing out to Keith before the meeting, Issaquah is so special and unique compared to any other community in this region, given the Issaquah Alps, the salmon streams, Lake Sammamish, access to the Cascades. We'll have people crawling over each other to get here, just like I did in 1984 when I wanted to live here. And we've seen that ever since I moved here. Look at Issaquah Highlands built out. When I moved here, that was all big forested trees up there. Talus the same way. And those two developments are hugely popular. So we need to dictate what we want. We don't let developers come in here and tell us what they want to do. We should be telling them what we want to do.
Totally agree with you.
I think that might be something good to have in the vision, particularly when we're going to update the paragraph that Ken, that you read to us to kick off. I think maybe make it very clear that while the city is still very clearly committed to accommodating pretty massive amount of growth over the next 20, 30 years, make very clear the city's This is a growth center. We're going to absorb a substantial amount of growth, but make it very clear that the city is not interested in having that growth immediately, but first making sure that we have the infrastructure there in place to facilitate that growth. Not at all back away from our commitment to grow Central Issaquah, but to ensure that with the city is making the investments, whether it be parks, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be the school district, making sure that stuff gets done not necessarily before, but concurrently with the growth, because we are in a position that we have met, especially given that we've got, I think, another 500 units still to build in the Highlands and whatnot. The city has very much made its short-term commitments to the Growth Management Act. And so I think we have room that if the city doesn't grow as much over the next 5 or 10 years, because we're busy doing things like building bridges across 90, which are very expensive, will take time, that's fine, and that is very much in accordance with the vision that we may not get a massive amount of growth in the next 5 to 8 to 10 years, insofar as the city is still planning and building and investing for a much larger amount of growth to be coming in the 10 to 20 to 30 year vein. And I think that might be very helpful to have that at the very beginning of the vision and put that forward to the city council. Because the city still needs to make very clear to the region, when you look in the context of things like Metro Connects and the Sound Transit Station, the city still needs to continue to show to the region that we're going to turn this into an urban core of some form. That still needs to very much be there, but we're not, unlike Bellevue, unlike the U District in Seattle, that's not going to be happening in the next 5 years. It might be a little bit further down, and then we are just getting ready for when that growth will come.
right, and that's along the same lines of Lindsay's comments, that you have short-term items that you want to do for your budgeting purposes, and then long-term, so that there's sort of a whole journey, if you will, that helps council and the community understand how do you get to the end.
Yeah, but I think what I'm saying, it would be great to frame that first,
Right.
and then that then leads to
Right.
more tactical stuff, as Lindsay was suggesting.
Right.
So
And we're
EJ,
probably
mission.
only one
So
or
that-
two real estate cycles away from this,
Yeah.
starting.
So vision is what you're trying to be. Mission is how you're going to, what you do while you're trying to get there. So what you're talking about is actually a mission statement along with the vision.
Yeah, very much so, and then making it more clear that not only what we want the city to look like, but when we want it to look like that, and to make clear that this is a long-term vision, and that if it doesn't happen immediately, that we're okay with that. If we are going to lay strict vertical mixed use, if the economist study came and said we're 5 to 10 years from that penciling out, we're okay with that. because
Right.
we still think it will happen as long as the region keeps growing. So we're going to set our regulations so that when, the financial metrics finally tilt enough that it is worthwhile building, we've got the rules ready so that when the
Sound
developers
Transit
want to
won't be here till what, 2042? So-
yeah,
So we don't want to grow
thereabouts.
too fast. I mean,
Right.
we got timed. I'll be happy if we
Definitely.
start to build out by 2042.
Right.
We just have
Can we
to
start?
grow this the right way. Yeah, wisely. I can't, you're going to build out these 10 sections, and they're going to have solid buildings on it with 5 or 10 feet tall, whatever, stories tall. They're not going to come in 10 years and tear them down and start over again. So you're looking, that long range is what you're talking about right now. And do you want 30,000 people in Pickering? I certainly don't.
Not before that train station is there. It'll be a disaster.
Okay, we're going to open it up to what Joan said to start throwing out ideas for each of them. And I wanted to sort of not narrow us, but these were the criteria or the categories that I missed whatever that was, that we were using to sort of get our bold ideas, our inspiring ideas for each of these pieces, for each of the neighborhoods. So we're going to start, and I have the existing visions if we wanted to flash back to them at any time, but this is the overarching vision. And then Sammamish Park, we remember where Sammamish Park was. It's directly south of Lake Sammamish State Park. And the other piece to answer what was confusing to the council is we had current language, it is this now, and then we had future language, it will be this, to try to keep it separate of what's existing and what we hope it to be. And so we thought for you all tonight, we were just going to start with what it is. Excuse me, and then you guys.
Sorry. Can I jump in?
Jump in now.
We had one question was, do we need 10 districts? Is that the right number? And I'd hate to go through all 10 and then at the end say, we think we really just need 3 or 4. So maybe we should have the question first about, do we want all 10?
Okay,
Is
that's
that
the way,
okay to?
because we thought that once you started thinking about little and big and building out and not, maybe then that would spark the question of, wow, this is really like its neighbor. It really doesn't need to be on its own. You could go the other way if people know the districts well enough to know if they could merge them or
We were driving
not.
around yesterday and looking at each one of these districts in a different light, simply because Keith would say, yeah, we can't do this because this owner is here and he's going to do this, and the creek is here and it's whatever. But when you look at the decisions that you made for the 10 areas, they are completely different. And I don't think that you can join a couple of them together because you're going to lose the ability to make them different. And you don't want a thing over the city where everything looks the same. You want some variety and some excitement. And so I don't see any, personally, I don't see any that you can get rid of. But that's just me.
So just I'd like to kind of recap, because I feel like we've been saying a lot of the same things and kind of working our way up and down the spectrum of vision to implementation and talking about all these different things. And I feel like if we don't start at the top, at the city level of what is the vision for the city, and work our way down to a more granular level, that we're going to end up kind of in this loop. And we're going to get to some conclusion and then come back to something that kind of affects that. So if I could recommend kind of a action plan based on what we've talked about so far, if we could agree on kind of a city vision, if you will, in terms
The
of
central Issaquah.
So before we get there, kind of the city, at the
Okay.
city level, and maybe that's already established and we say, okay, great, move on. And then the central vision, and then agreeing on the central boundary, what we're talking about for central, what that is. and then looking at districts and district visions, and then establishing those or agreeing with those district boundaries, district uses, and district features. And then from there, once we've got all that kind of established or agreed upon, then we could, at later dates, jump into the implementation of how do we make sure that that all happens.
I like the structure.
I was going to find a slide. When did we go to Cal?
In 24 Cal Visions?
Oh, thank you. I'm looking at the things going, where is it? I'm just sleepy. Would it be, because I'm looking for, we made a slide that had what Central Issaquah is, that I think John would get to what we think Central Issaquah, the purpose sort of Central Issaquah within the whole city.
Is there an overarching citywide vision?
That would be the comprehensive plan, Ken.
But not a precise date.
Well,
Yeah, because I think you need to look at the overall city, like he's saying, because one of the things I heard people saying before is we want growth. I think one of the things you've got to look at where we are today, and with our commitment to growth, as far as housing, we're almost there. So I think when we start looking at saying, 5-year plan, our 5-year plan with the central area plan shouldn't be housing per se. It may be mixed use and have some, but we would need to be concentrating on the infrastructure, the parks, the getting the green necklace, and those things implemented, because this is the only place we have to deal to help make the infrastructure for the rest of the city. So that's why I think it's really critical that you concentrate first on the city vision, and seeing, based upon where the city is now, we may want to change the central area vision to make sure it includes those, so that we get then in the central area vision what we really need long term.
it would be great if we had the time to do that, but the charge from the council is to only do central. And I pulled up a slide here. Can you, is it big enough to see? But this talks about, but there it is, of what generally the vision for Central Issaquah was when we created it then, and pretty much what it is now. It has our regional growth center that we applied specifically for to get more transit and transportation funding. So we had to agree to certain growth targets in the regional growth center. So it is that. I mean, it's undeniable. It's the balance of jobs and housing, recreation and entertainment opportunities that goes with being urban, as Joe mentioned. It was the new direction for the central part of the city so that all the neighborhoods on the hillsides could remain intact and not have to be more dense. Sustainable development, of course, has always been a big deal to Issaquah. We've always been on the cutting edge of that. And the other piece that Ken mentioned was that you'd be able to get to your daily need. It'd be urban enough that you'd be able to get to your daily needs within walking, biking, or transit, that you wouldn't always need a car. It would be very much multimodal, and we had all sorts of projects, even once we hit the standards of projects that were needed to help create the infrastructure so that when the people and all the jobs are here, that they're able to get around. And then, as Ken mentioned, the green necklace was the park system and trail system that is so important for an urban area so that it doesn't feel as urban. And so these were sort of the building blocks that we believe still exist for the purpose of Central. Obviously, Central Issaquah is not going to be a bedroom community. It's where all the development is supposed to go so that the existing neighborhoods on the outlier and the rural area, too, doesn't have to be infringed upon. So I think this is the starting spot. We can't go back to the full city vision yet until we annually amend the comp plan. If we want to do that next year, it's certainly in our power to look at that. But our charge this month, and perhaps next month if we can't get it done, is to revisit the central vision.
Yeah, so I guess rather than, I made it sound like I want to rework all that, I'd like to use that to inform all of our discussions below that. So establish what is the city of Issaquah's vision, right? What is the overall vision? And then use that to inform our discussion about central and all the districts. Make sure that it is always aligning with the level above.
Right, and I would say that Central, again, and maybe I need a translator, is the purpose of Central was to be the growth area to take the state targets that we were given for jobs and housing. So it didn't have to go in the rural area, and it didn't have to go in the existing neighborhoods or on the hillsides.
Right, so that's the function of Central, right? But
That's the, yeah.
the vision of Central needs to be established in alignment with the vision of the city.
Yeah, like
What
the
is-
word urban doesn't show up anywhere, or suburban on that page.
Right, those are kind of words that, yes, thank you for whoever said that. So we try to describe what it means so that people don't just flinch and say, yee, scary. You know, we try to describe what does it mean. Is it mid-rise buildings? Is it walking to your job and to your, and you know, you're in the profession, it's not scary to you, but to some folks, it's a scary
I'm in the
thought.
profession?
Well, yes, you are,
Okay, so this counts.
yeah.
Because I think, sorry, yes, I didn't get my W-2. I think, because I think that might be part of the problem, because when at the very beginning, we kicked off and everyone kind of name-checked Atlas and Gateway and how terrible they were, and that's why we need to do this. But I don't think I don't think it's clear what's wrong with those, because I think part of the reason that people freaked out is they didn't realize that Central Issaquah was going to be transforming from a suburban strip mall to an urban core. And so I think
Right.
I would almost counter-argue that I think we need to be more explicit about that. If that's the vision, if that's not the vision, then we
Right.
don't need to do it. But if that is the vision, I think we need to lean into that.
Right.
And make that very clear so that people understand what's coming.
Right, and I think there was a 5-year community process to do that, and then the task force took another year after that before council actually adopted it. So it was a good 6 or 7 years we worked with the community to try to figure out what we were going to be, what Central was going to be in the future.
And are we looking to change that? I mean, we're
my mind-
not from scratch,
Right,
but are we
in my
looking to
mind,
refine that?
Because we've already applied and received the designation to be a regional center, to unwind that would be, I think, difficult. We could unwind it if all of a sudden, but that would take a lot of, so I think
I don't
maybe
think-
we're making
No,
it
yeah,
too
no
hard.
one's, yeah, but no one's objecting to the growth center designation.
Right.
But you can still be a growth center and have a discussion on whether or not it's going to be a suburban form or an urban form.
Sure, you wouldn't be able to get the densities and the, if you make it suburban, but you could still try to do it that way.
But you could. I don't think anyone wants to, but you could. You
Right.
could make it very clear that it's going to be a car-centric, parking garages and office towers. You could do that.
Yeah.
No one wants that, but because no one wants it, I think we need to be more explicit that we are looking to create an urban form, particular in the center of Central Issaquah. Because I think also one of the things is Tibbetts Valley, Pickering, and maybe some of the other ones, the vision is to be more urban, but for some of the other ones, it is, I would argue, a more suburban, a very walkable transit, but still a very suburban form. And so I think maybe that language does need to be used.
Right, and
in the
we
vision.
certainly can for each of the districts. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
And I don't think we should soft pedal the language either. I think we should be more transparent with it, and if it needs to be stronger, to convey the message to the public so that they're not shocked when they see the next 10-story building go in, or the next Atlas. Because I think people don't trust what's happening now with Atlas because it caught them off guard. We approved it in the CIP, and we said, this is what we want, but then when we built it, it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on in our city? We're growing like crazy, and it's one building. So I think we need to be stronger with the language and be more upfront with the direction the city's going with the growth, so that people are not just on board with it, but we set the right expectation instead of soft pedaling it.
Right, I agree.
Trish, all I care about is that the Central Issaquah vision is included with the neighborhood visions as an introduction to it, so that we're not presenting orphaned
Right.
neighborhoods.
Right.
That they are within a larger plan.
Right.
That's all I care about.
Right.
And just
And
one,
that's how they exist today, but you're right.
yeah, one of the comments as far as a little bit of feedback as far as with Gateway and having been on that, we were looking, I think, with the districts is have them all be somewhat self-sustaining. And with the Gateway, what was envisioned there was have more mixed use, small retail, small business. And what we got was all apartments. So they're still dependent upon having to get in their car and go someplace. And so that's not going to, what we got out of Gateway was not something that's self-sustaining and people can stay there, nor is it anything that's really complementing the existing neighborhoods, because there's really no room for parks and all, and there's no really identification for transit. So one of the things when we look at the districts is I think we also need to make sure that the daily needs can be done, and then it's a sustainable development, meaning that it's self-sufficient, and you don't have to leave your neighborhood every day to go to work necessarily or go to retail.
So I think, sorry, Ken, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that we're not going to make 1,000 acres of self-sustaining neighborhoods. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be certain parts of central Issaquah that's going to be walkable to services. So Gateway, and I don't need you to agree with me, Mary, but my opinion is Gateway, most people will get in their cars, but you have a boardwalk that's going to connect you to Hyla, which then will be able to be walkable to the grocery store, assuming it stays there. Now, it may not stay there. A train station may take it out. But, those are things that, are just going to happen. But, what I can tell you is the market for that area for retail is not there. It's not going to be there in 10 years. It's not going to be there in 20 years because there's not enough vehicular traffic and not enough rooftops to support retail in that area. And so if we're going to really look at these, I think we need to be realistic in terms of what the appropriate land use is now and what it will be in the foreseeable future during this plan range, because I think if we expect 1,100 acres of beige, it's not going to be that, and we can spend as much time on that conversation as we need to.
So on Gateway, just quickly, let me reiterate what the past vision was from our prior plan, because we got just the opposite. Create a signature gateway to Issaquah. It's the eastern going entryway to Issaquah. This grand view of the Issaquah Alps. Beautiful. And the vision was that there might be a little entry sign, welcome to Issaquah and the Issaquah Alps, made out of stone, something that looked attractive, not apartments right up to the edge of I-90. Create a signature gateway that maintains significant open space views from I-90. Enhance Tibbetts Creek, Schneider Creek, surrounding wetlands and buffers while incorporating them into the development. Use natural materials such as timber and stone in the building and in the design to reinforce Pacific Northwest identity along with evergreen emphasis. We got none of that. On Atlas, it was similar. I wasn't concerned about the height. That was right with the plan. I'm okay with the height. But when I met with that developer before they even got their permit to build, I told him, and it was a worse design than I said, it looked like Soviet apartment gulag complex to me. It was a terrible architectural design, and they did slightly improve it. It's not as bad as it was when I saw it, but to me, I said that's the kind of design that may belong in Issaquah Highlands as a more modern urban style development, but that doesn't belong down on the flats of Issaquah where stone, timber, that kind of thing is more appropriate. So those were my big problems I've had with those two developments.
So I think that's why we're having this conversation. So there was a expectation for Western Gateway. And what we add now is we know what we've got. In terms of all of it except for a couple small parcels. We have also the addition of most likely noise walls from WashDOT that are going to get built in front of that, which will again, affect that, the vision that you had about kind of green stepping back to Newport, it's clearly not going to be that. So the question, I think, the bigger question for Western Gateway is, if that is a Western Gateway for our city in terms of eastbound I-90, you know, how do we do that? How do we, is that still salvageable, or is that part of the vision that needs to be, you know, erased? And that's part of this conversation, right? Yeah.
So why did we allow it? If it's totally, not substandard, it's
These aren't
contrary to
regulations.
what the vision is. How did we, and why did we even allow it? And what failed?
So part of it is, maybe we need to further define what it is, right? So when we said we allowed it, is it basically three-story woody walk-ups, and that's not spectacular or even unique? Is it that it didn't have the green buffer to I-90? I mean, so
It doesn't have any of the attributes that the vision actually stipulated. They're boxes.
Yeah, covering every square inch.
So
If I could, one of the misconceptions about the CIP, and it's something that I recognize real well, is the CIP is only as good as the history you have with it. Everybody on the task force could have looked at the development plans and said, no, that doesn't fit. City staff did not put the time and energy and anything else into the CIP. Given the amount of work they have, they can't. They have to go by the regulations. And the regulations didn't include the visions the way that it did. It was all put together very quickly to get out. And that's the whole idea of going back and starting all over, is so that the vision and the codes and stuff can be put together, and that everybody's aware of it. So next time somebody comes in, it isn't a planner who's only been here for 6 months or 2 years that isn't familiar with the CIP going through the code and saying, well, the code says you can do this, let's do that. And then the community going, wait a minute, what happened to all this work we did? So that's part of getting the public involved and getting everybody involved, so you know what you are actually getting, so everybody knows it. Because if everybody doesn't know and it's just in the code, that's all the city has to go with for the developers.
Which means we have to change the code to get to where we are. And that was the reason, that's why we got Gateway, that's why we got,
So before we get to code, because code's layer 3, right? So what Ken said for Western Gateway is not what this says, frankly. What this says is create an attractive gateway. Okay, so you know what that developer says? My project is attractive. Okay, so attractive is probably not the word that we should have used here. It doesn't convey, I think, what Ken said was the task force's vision for this neighborhood.
Keep reading.
Well, to Issaquah that maintains significant open space views from I-90. Okay, well, I can see Bergsma from I-90. That's a significant open space view, right? I mean, so all I'm saying is the way this is written, if you didn't have, 5 years of task force time under your belt, this is hard to implement, I think.
Our vision was more precise. I don't know how it got to that.
Yeah.
But it got watered down. And again,
I'm not trying to blame, I just want to say, how do we do better?
Right.
To implement what we really wanted to have happen.
That's my
so that
point,
we
too.
don't get that. The problem with Gateway is, as you said, that's 20-year-old design of boxy old apartments with outdoor parking that covered up a productive wetland.
For the record, I didn't say that.
And we can do better, is my point. We must do better.
So I'm going to state that at the beginning of this district vision presentation to City Council, that we need a statement that answers the question of why the previous district visions, neighborhood visions, did not achieve our goals and how we can do better. So a statement such as, the previous district visions were too watered down and did not have a clear whatever to describe what needed to be, and were not followed up by codes and standards to solidify those visions so that they were actually implemented. So I think that is what City Council wants to see as the answer to why didn't this work before, and what are we going to do to make it work? And so then by stating what didn't work, what needs to do, and we say, now we're presenting a clear thing, but it's up to you to do X, Y, and Z.
Right. Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head on why what we give them, what you give them, can't just be the vision as Althea talks, because that's not going to be enough for them. They want to see how it's going to progress into existence, because the vision didn't work for them last time. So as wonderful as a pure vision is, I think we need to have all the pieces there for them to be comfortable with it, and probably for us to be comfortable with it as well. Can we start one, just for fun? Because we're into our hour, too. We were trying to be really good with time, so we wouldn't be here for so late. I think the first one we picked to work on is Sammamish.
So, Trish?
Yes.
So what I did was I pulled up Minneapolis's vision, and it says, and this is actually a true vision statement. It says, Minneapolis is a growing and vibrant world-class city with a flourishing economy and a pristine environment where all people are safe, healthy, and have equitable opportunities for success and happiness. And then they've got strategic direction. The first one is living well. So Minneapolis is safe and livable and has an active and connected way of life. It has one Minneapolis. Disparities are eliminated so all Minneapolis residents can participate and prosper. A hub of economic activity and innovation. Businesses, big and small, start, move, stay, and grow here. Great places, natural and built spaces work together, and our environment is protected. And the last one is a city that works. City government runs well and connects to the community it serves. So if you're looking at vision, the reason why things don't work is because the vision is not really a vision. It's a bunch of stuff just thrown together, right? And that's what happened. So if we want to do this properly, we need to actually do it as a vision statement, is my opinion.
I disagree.
And I'd say that the existing vision has, you mentioned jobs, we've got environmental, economic vitality, we have transportation, sense of community is the, I think we hit a lot of those things because all cities have to hit all those things. I think it's
So
how
can we
they,
pull up the vision for CIP, the new one that we did?
the new one for Cal? Because that's
Yeah.
what I pulled up. This one? These? Or the
One
ones?
for the whole thing. So you know the one.
The one with the picture, this one?
Yeah, but do we
But the
have
next-
this one for the whole sub area?
For the whole sub-area, it would be, how many, it would be in which version? Was that in the cow?
Land and Shore. Go to Land and Shore.
Yeah, but.
We should get that far.
I can look here.
No whisper.
Don't look too hard at this, it might make you a little nauseous. Oh, that's because it popped out. It does this to me every time. Just wait a second. Okay.
Looking that information up,
What did I say?
can you specifically tell us what exactly we are supposed to do today with this? Are we looking for a 2.0 version of this? Are we looking to optimize this?
We were trying, well,
Bam, boom.
it's a, I'm just going to blank it because I'm not. What we're supposed to do, what council is hoping to get from PPC are a revisiting of the vision. so that it works better, so that it's clear, so that it gets us, the community, what we want in Central Issaquah. That can be whatever it is that you want it to be. It could have the different steps of long-term and short-term implementation with it. It could have pictures, it can have language with primary uses and all of those pieces. Because remember, other parts of the moratorium work plan are trying to solve the other pieces of the frustration of like architectural review and urban design is one of the moratorium items. It's going to fix how, like the part that Ken read, the building materials, the architectural styles that we put in the visions, but we didn't regulate them. So
Okay.
they can build anything. So some of those other pieces are getting corrected in the moratorium work plan.
So the CIP, we're really looking at a 1.1 revision as opposed to a 2.0 revision.
Whatever that is, I don't speak that language.
He wants to know, are we supposed to create a new one from scratch? Or are we supposed to take what we have and just kind of evolve it?
You can, I would say, you have to start with the existing conditions. I mean, they're not a vision.
No,
You kinda have
not
to
the
start
existing
with
conditions, the
bones that
existing
is there.
document.
No, you don't have to. You don't
Okay.
have to start with it.
So we took, so I'm going to now go all the way back to 635. So, part of this was we spent a bunch of time, a little bit with you guys, but a bunch with stakeholders. We met with businesses from each neighborhood. We had a couple neighborhood meetings. Mary was at one, I know, that we had at Atlas. And what we heard, we also tried to evolve it from what it was based on what we heard some of the criticisms or critiques that we heard from the council. And so what we did was, as Trish mentioned earlier, there were these 5 kind of topics that seemed like they wanted to be more specifically addressed than in the previous versions of the neighborhood visions. So what we did is we updated the vision statement at the very top for both the sub area and then for each neighborhood located within. But then we identified some of the existing conditions. So this middle part, which has kind of our topical areas, I think it needed to tell a story of what we've got today and what we think is going to happen, because then that ultimately led to what we thought was the implementing strategies at the end. And I think this is somewhat in parallel to what Lindsay suggested earlier, which is, okay, what's your vision? And then what do you think is going on with each of these? And then what do you need for success? And that's what these implementing strategies were at the bottom. And so we did that for each of the neighborhoods, and I think we exploded the council committee's brain. But so whether or not this is the right structure, so there's a whole conversation about, is this the right structure? And I think we should talk about that, because this structure is very different than, I can flip, well, I don't know which of the 12 tabs we have open is the old structure, but we could pick up the old one and say, okay, here's what it used to look like, here's what it looks like now. Are we going in the right direction just from a structural standpoint? And then we can talk about the actual meat that's on the bones, and did we get that right? Is it not right? When we start to talk about some of these, in terms of unpacking the green necklace within each neighborhood, Ken and I talked a little bit earlier about, the green necklace has been on the table for a long time now, and it's really, a lot of people say, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. And that part needs to get unpacked. And part of it's happening through the park plan that's going through right now with the Parks Department. But this is what this looks like. I think we were kind of nibbling around the edges. So here's kind of a peek behind the curtain. But, here's the vision for the sub area. And, whether you want to start kind of wordsmithing this, whether you think this is, I don't want to start talking about Minneapolis, although I appreciate, the access to the internet we have.
No, actually, it was an example of, so they've
Sure.
clearly done a lot of work to get to that place.
Sure.
So that was just an example.
Well, and there was a lot of work, I think, to get to this place. Now, whether this is still right or not, I think we need to have that kind of conversation. But I think that, I think if, again, we were trying to kind of give you guys kind of free rein to have conversations about this the way you wanted it to, but it seems like we kind of have spooled around in a circle a bit, and maybe we need to actually dig into some concrete examples to see, what do we think? Is this
Actually,
thumb up, thumb down?
As far as getting this thing done within 1 or 2 meetings, I think is very aspirational. This is almost a task force. This is almost a committee that needs to sit down and dive into this, multiple sessions, and tear it apart and create a 2.0 document. This is not something we can do in 2 nights. And
I
wordsmithing
think
it
we
is
might be able to do something with it that takes it forward. And I would suggest, instead of going into any of the individual neighborhoods, is just to take a look at the type of information that's there and say, is something missing? And are we conveying our needs with the function of that document and the type of content that is there before going into wordsmithing?
I think we need to understand it. We're not there. We're nowhere there.
Well, so I think we three would say we understand it because we spent a couple of years on it. And personally, I'm comfortable with what's documented, I think, although some of it appears to have changed and I'm not maybe up to date. But for me, the biggest thing I think needs to happen is to tell the council that the vision, and we can go through it all, maybe that's what we need to do is just look at it. But assuming, and I think it's still good, that the vision is good, the biggest message is to make the vision a reality, you got to have the backup to make it implementable, which means codes, regulations, policies, and enforcement. And then you've got to have the staff educated enough so when a developer comes in and says, this is what I want to do, they say, no, that's not in keeping with our vision. Here's what that says. And oh, by the way, this is what our code says, so you can't do what you would like to do like you did in Renton, because this is Issaquah, and we do it different here. And we let things develop the way we want them to go, not the way someone tells us they want to do it. That's what we've got to get to. And there's got to be rules, code, policy behind it to make it implementable, or it's just an aspirational vision that someone can legally say, I'm not doing it, and we won't be able to do anything about that.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, I think all of this is probably pretty good still. I know we felt really good when it was done.
I don't think you could wordsmith it, but I think everybody kind of knows where we want to go. The moratorium is over at the end of December. I mean, think about that. Do you want to have something in place by the end of December, or do you just want to spend another 15 meetings deciding how to write the vision, what words to put in it, and have builders go in and build whatever they want? What is the decision here?
So can I say something about that? So visions don't change, right? They're not supposed to change, so they can go up to 20 years. It's code that, so you have to make it big enough that you can adjust your code as you go. But it doesn't change the vision. The vision has to always remain the same. And I feel like we're confusing those two things. The code and all the implementation stuff can change as long as it's consistent with the vision. But the vision is what the picture, what we think Issaquah should look like.
Absolutely.
And how we evolve that with the code is fine. But saying that we have to have a vision in place because of code stuff is to me is very short-sighted, right?
But I think, so I don't disagree, but here we have 11 visions, right? We don't just have one vision. We have a vision for the sub-area, but then we have 10 sub-visions. And I think what we're being asked to look at is, one, is this vision for the sub-area still okay? And I agree with you, Althea. It's been 5 years? 4 years, 7 years, 6 years, somewhere in there, 6, 7. Somewhere between 4 and 7. You know, that's a short amount of time. This is a 30-year plan. You know, 4 to 7 years is a short period of time. So, you know, I think we can look at this vision and say, you know, has anything changed? Is there any reason why this is not what Central Issaquah is or should be 30 years from now? That should be a fairly quick conversation because that's really high level. That's like 200,000 feet. But then we're going to dive down to 50,000 feet and look at each neighborhood and say, okay, now based on that list that Trish put up earlier about what has changed in the last number of years, you know, is the vision changed for that neighborhood? You know, I think Western Gateway is going to be the one we talk about the most because so much of it is just, and lost might be the right word. I'm not going on record to saying that either. You know, but it's not turning out the way that it was envisioned. And so that's a conundrum that I think we have to deal with here, because it would be hard for me to say we should leave the vision for Western Gateway the same if we know we're not going to get there. And that's, I think, where the council got kind of hung up. So let's start here. This is our safest space because it's our highest space. So again, let's talk about construct first before we get into the words. So the construct is vision summary at the top, which tells you where we think we want to be or where we want to go. So this should be the here's where we want to be a long ways from now for this area. These individual subtopics are meant to really pull out some understanding, because, you know, 5 years from now, when people say, well, why did this neighborhood turn out the way it did? You know, I think one of the things that we felt pretty strongly about, like, for example, on mobility and connections, is regional traffic's a big deal. You know, we talked about it on the tour last night as we sat on East Lake Sammamish, moving very slowly, even for me.
It's
you know,
dangerous there.
And so, you know, so that's a reality, and that's something that's more significant to this community now than 5 years ago when this plan was put together. I think it was there, but it was maybe a little bit more subliminal than it is now. So it seemed like as we talk about, you know, mobility and connections, what's the problem? What's the challenges facing Central Issaquah? You know, and what's coming in terms of, we know there's a transit station coming in 2041, and we know in 2026 we need to start planning for where that's going. And so
Keith, before diving into
Yes.
mobility and connections, you asked, does this format meet the needs?
Yes.
And I would say the problem I have with how it is right now is the verb tense. It differs between is and will be.
Yes.
And so I would
It's supposed to be both.
I would either create 2 sections under primary uses and architectural style in each of the areas that says current vision, and do that, or I would standardize on one or the other depending on what our needs are.
That's a great comment. We knew that problem existed. Thank you, though. And then ultimately from here, getting down to the bottom.
And then in terms of structure, so those kind of 5 categories, if we're going to try to kind of cover everything in those 5, I'm wondering how those align or overlap with the guiding principles from the currently adopted Central Issaquah plan, which is environment, housing, sense of community, transportation and other essential services, economic vitality and innovation. So I don't know how those categories, because those categories are also used in the current Central Issaquah plan, but kind of in a different way. But I just want to make sure that and it says that these guiding principles were established by the community. So I want to continue to use whatever is.
So let me go back to,
Overarching for the whole central,
so.
the ones that you mentioned.
So John, if you look at, so here's what's in the plan right now.
Right.
All right, so what's in the plan right now is here's our vision statements. So again, pretty small. So, just from a scope perspective, we fit 2 neighborhoods on a page. We had primary uses, we had key environment, and then mobility connections. And we went from there, so we felt like we've kind of unpacked it because, environment and green necklace, although they're interconnected, they're very different things. And placemaking was really not part of the original construct. But as we talked to people in each neighborhood, and our friend from the Grange is here, thank you again, John, it became clear that, whether they're businesses or residents or visitors, in each area had this idea that, hey, there should be something cool about our area, something distinct and something that's memorable. And so we felt like adding placemaking, if we're going to still have 10, and I think that's still a question for me, Joan, sorry. Is there a place in each neighborhood that is memorable? And I don't know. We'll talk about that later. So I don't know if that was a good answer. I think it actually is consistent, but is a little bit more unpacked than the previous version.
I think one of the areas, though, that John mentioned that was in whatever other plan that is economic development, which I'm not
Economic
really...
vitality.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, I understand placemaking and architectural style, maybe that fits into either of those. Do we feel like it does?
No.
The guiding principles that John was reading are the overarching for all of Central, knowing that if we're going to be the jobs housing spot for the next 20 to 30 years, we would have to make sure that economic vitality worked. So it wasn't just cranking out jobs or just cranking out, that we had to have a balance, and it had to keep our sense of place and the environment as a priority as well.
I feel like, though, if we're talking about these individual neighborhoods, we have to understand whether the neighborhood is more business, more
Right, and that's in
housing.
primary uses.
that'd be
That's the
within
primary
use.
uses part.
Okay.
But I think so I guess I have a very broad definition of economic vitality. I think if we do these things right, they will be economically vital. And, especially if you create a place, that people want to be, then businesses will want to be there, and it will have, activity, and that's pretty much definition of economic vitality, right? Because then businesses will want to be there. People will want to live there. Success. All right. Okay. Where are we? Are you guys ready to go one layer down at 8:20?
Can I throw out one thing just as a
Yes.
comment? For the vision, I think one of my pieces of feedback is the spiel that I had a little bit earlier about timeline. I think it might be helpful to throw a reference to that in terms of the vision.
Sure.
Is that...
Sure. I think at this level, so at the 200,000 foot level, if there wants to be, I don't know if we want to call it a mission, or if there's something that we want to add that's at this level but not at the neighborhood level.
Yeah, I think even within the context of this vision, I think I have thrown in a sentence somewhere that says something about how the vision is to invest so that the growth will come, but the stress is, I don't want to do any wordsmithing now, but something along those lines to make clear at the very beginning that this is we're trying to tee ourselves up for growth, not to grow, because those are slightly different things.
Okay.
That's all. Just wanted to throw that off before we move forward.
I think that's an okay. I think, to kind of Ron's statement earlier, and I think Lindsay was on that page as well, to put something in here that describes why we went from vision 1.0 to 1.1. I think that is great, because 3 years from now, somebody will wonder why there was 2 versions of this thing, right? Because we'll all forget. 'Cause some of us are old, forget things. Okay.
One more on the
Yes.
big picture level is what I mentioned to you earlier. I'm a little surprised that after all this time, there still isn't a plan or a route defined for what this green necklace is. There are key elements of it already in place. The Rainier Trail, the Maple Juniper Trail, Tibbetts Valley Park, Lake Sammamish State Park, Pickering, the whole trail through the Pickering.
I was gonna make a similar comment. I think it would be great that if we're gonna have a standalone page for each neighborhood, to have a standalone page for the Green Necklace.
Absolutely, and it's got to be defined now, down to the parcel and route level, or it'll never happen. You got to know, if this parcel gets developed, we've got to have a trail corridor through it.
I think that would be the long-term plan for the park departments. I don't think you want to get that granular, but I do think having an aspirational sketch would be very helpful for the purposes
Mapping out
of
what's
vision
in
making.
existence, where are the gaps, and what are we going to do to close those gaps?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So that needs to happen at the large level, the whole level, because each neighborhood refers to the necklace and their particular piece, but nowhere does that whole necklace come together.
Because I see the point of the necklace isn't as much to navigate within the neighborhoods as to navigate between the neighborhoods. That's fair.
So in the implementation strategies at the sub-area level, and I'm going to guess with you this is woefully inadequate based on what and so I think where we're down to is, yes, this should be an implementation of the sub-area plan of Central Issaquah, is to.
But Keith, I think we have the map. If you look at not these pages, but the printouts, you have these vague green lines.
Yes.
No, not the bubbles, but you've got green shaded lines. I think that's great. I would agree. I think
showing a bigger map of those and then saying, this is what we have, this is our intention, here are the gaps.
And even if the intention is this very vaguely defined green Photoshop, I think that's great. We need to have that first, and then we can then figure out what parcels need to be filled in. But that's not vision making. That's actually blocking and tackling.
Yeah, you're right. At the vision level, we need that. I want to get to the tactical level, or it won't happen. And it isn't just the green necklace. It's then, how do we connect the green necklace to the East Lake Sammamish Trail, the I-90 Trail, the Issaquah to Preston Trail, to Tiger Mountain, to Squawk Mountain, to Cougar. We got to have all of that defined, or it's just not going to happen.
Totally, but I think for the purpose of the vision, you would just have bullet points that say this needs to be connected to this, and this.
But my point being, we can't just leave it at the vision level. It's got to get documented quickly, or we'll never make it happen.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that sounds a lot of
Let's
scope.
put that in a requirements checklist, something that says, here are the things that the vision, that need to happen for the vision to be
successful.
Seen. Yeah.
Thank you. Add that. Those were the two I had: the codes, the regulations, the policies, and then a detailed layout of the green necklace. Those are the two things I think are absolutely essential to make this happen.
Success
Okay.
checklist.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay. Yes, we are. Okay.
Might I suggest that if we're going to start with a neighborhood, we start with Pickering? That seems to be the most solidified, that may be the easiest to start with.
All right. So the vision for Pickering neighborhood is as a mixed-use neighborhood anchored by Costco's international headquarters, Pickering Farm, and convenient access to the south side of I-90 from new vehicular crossing. Issaquah Creek runs along the eastern boundary of this neighborhood and serves as a backdrop for Pickering Trail that connects to Lake Sammamish State Park, as well as the Lake Sammamish Regional Trail. In addition, convenient access to the new Sound Transit light rail station will be a significant catalyst for this neighborhood.
There is a mix of vision and current in there that makes it a bit confusing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think maybe tactically do the same thing that Lindsay suggested for the columns. For the vision, have a current and a vision, and just peel them apart.
Okay. So besides kind of current and future, and so we can reconstruct that, I believe. That's not.
And then it might be helpful to add the new roads, since that's happening on the map. Or the point of the map to show the current.
Actually, adding that in as if it's there would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Yeah.
helpful, since those are in flight.
The new version that you have of the map does have it.
Yeah, is this, yeah, should we be critiquing this map, not that map?
That's the newer map from this.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the vision, we say, yes, Costco is there, and there is access, but what is it going to be?
Right. So so right now what you have is Costco takes up kind of this much of the geography of this neighborhood. This is critical area along the east side. And you have basically a single-story surface parked retail for the balance of the neighborhood. You know, as we sat there and talked about this last night, you know, the things that are changing here, as you guys talked about, there's a new road here at the east end. There's also likely going to be another crossing that will connect this neighborhood to Tibbetts, most likely, depending on how far east that crossing happens. You know, the train station, whether it's on the south side or the north side or in the right-of-way, it will connect to both of these sides of the freeway. You will be able to get there from there.
Can I ask why Pickering is a distinct neighborhood from Tibbetts Valley?
Because they're divided by a giant freeway?
But if the vision is to bridge that divide, and we're going to have a train station that is, for all intents and purposes, in the right-of-way, the train station should be at the center. Could be.
Yeah.
If the train station goes in the I-90 right-of-way, which, in my opinion, I think is both the most likely and I think the most preferable, why don't we have a vision that the Tibbetts Valley and the Pickering neighborhoods become a single urban neighborhood that, yes, there's a freeway in the middle of it, but you know, there's a freeway in the middle of other downtowns, and you're able to bridge that. It's not obviously not preferred, but could we have a vision that we stitch these two neighborhoods together, and that the intent is they have a single identity that's bridged? I mean, you can easily build a beautiful light rail station that makes it very easy for people to move between the neighborhoods and have a common identity.
Okay, that's a great suggestion.
And are those the two the neighborhoods, districts that have urban core?
Yes.
Are they wholly?
Yes.
So their zoning is?
I keep looking for our zoning map. I'm not sure who stole it. The vandals.
Yeah. I mean, do we want to?
Combined, they would meet the urban core. The urban core is already the same for both of them.
Yeah, the little one is also urban core.
So saying something like, our goal is for more connectivity gained by having this light rail and a build-up in the other areas,
I think his question is, should this just be one district?
Because the question is, do you
But it's
want?
not now.
It's not now, but the vision is that it would become a single. Because do you want, when you redevelop those shopping centers that are on the south side of the retaining pond, do you want those buildings facing the pond and facing Costco, or do you want them facing the light rail station? In my opinion, I think the vision is that the new development in the southwestern half of Pickering should be facing I-90, same as the development in Tibbetts Valley should be facing I-90, since I think the light rail station will be you cannot get more placemaking than a light rail station. And so I think if you have it as a single neighborhood, it needs to be stitched together. Right now, it's two neighborhoods, but the vision is that it's a single neighborhood that's tied together with the transit station, with at least one road bridge, potentially an additional pedestrian bridge, and then the vision is to stitch it together as a single urban core that's then surrounded by urban but not as dense other neighborhoods that make up the rest of Central Issaquah.
So in terms of, so what are you trying to create? That is the vision, right? Everything I'm hearing seems more about how you're going to get there. And so the question is, so when you see it, what do you see?
So my vision, it is urban. It is urban. It's not
two neighborhoods. Yeah, there's urban core and there's outside the core.
Yeah.
So what would you want to be able to do, or what would you want the flavor of that region to be?
You can live, work, and play without leaving either of those two districts.
So that's a vision, right? It's not how, what pieces you're going to put in there, right? So
Right, and I get that, but I think the vision can be just as explicit as the two neighborhoods should become a single neighborhood from a placemaking and from a navigability standpoint.
Well, I think the whole idea that the Cinnabar, Barnes & Noble, big lots, them being there in 30 years is pretty unlikely.
Oh, for sure,
So
yeah.
the vision might include, and it talks about housing, but dynamic urban, multi-use, multi-level retail housing combination to create a thriving neighborhood focused around the transit center that bridges the gap between the two neighborhoods on both sides of I-90. Something like that is what pops into my head.
Because you want to make sure the code is structured so that when someone puts in a building, they don't orient it so the building is just trying to get to the Sammamish Parkway to get onto 90.
Right.
You want it to be facing the freeway so that it's there, so that when the bridges and the light rail station come, that's what the
people
building's
go
up for.
I mean, I was just in Hong Kong, and it's fascinating that every one of their train stops or rail, their subway, if you want to call it that, has all kinds of multi-level retail and hotels and giant condos, 80 stories high, but also fantastic urban parks built into all of that. I mean, they're a perfect example of how to do it right. We need to follow that kind of an example.
Would it be helpful to have something in the vision to say that the code should be structured to anticipate future transit and be oriented toward that? Because is that mentioned now? I mean, because when this was originally developed, we didn't know we were in a light rail station.
Right.
Now we are.
Yep.
Do we want to presuppose roughly where that is and articulate that the code should anticipate?
I think that's a great idea. I was going to suggest the same thing, because when this was developed, we didn't have ST3, and we do now. So why don't we bake that in now?
It's huge.
And you're talking about making it the focal point that's almost, like monumental to this.
Yeah, and then make it very clear that the vision is that the light rail station will be the focal point of this neighborhood.
But the light rail station, we won't know where that is for 15, 20 years.
But if we create a space for it,
let's create a vision for it, because I think, and I made this comment to staff before, I think the city can make a decision on where the light rail station is now and plan accordingly, because Sound Transit will more or less put the station where the city wants it within cost.
Put it
But I
where
think,
the economics make the most sense.
yeah, but the cities, from how Sound Transit works, they very much defer to the cities in terms of station placement.
Has the Sound Transit talked about initial station placement or any kind of study or timeline?
Well, I don't want to say preferred. There's some words that I don't know because it was Monday when I last heard them. So the ballot
Representative alignment?
Thank you. My gosh, thank you, son. So the representative alignment actually showed the train station kind of on the south side of the freeway, kind of cutting into the meadows, which then freaked out all the shop owners in the meadows. So, I think the city has a much better, I'll just go ahead and share. So right now, the freeway comes like this, 900 goes over, right? If you were to actually raise the grade of I-90 through here, you then can pull the lanes apart, which creates enough room for a train station in between the lanes. And it's now up at 20 feet, which allows you to put that crossing that we all want at, whether it's 12th Maple or somewhere 10th, that basically is going to cut through Jack in the Box. Sorry, Jack in the Box. But then that stays at grade. So now you don't have big ramps on some sort of overcrossing because of the amount of land that we would lose on both sides for that elevated crossing is catastrophic. So this becomes now, I think, a vision that we can start to kind of see the benefits of. But what you've got to do is, the first piece of the puzzle is you've got to get WashDOT to be willing to pooch their freeway.
They're pooching their freeway, everything west of SR 900. So it's a vision, and I don't think we should get bogged down on the engineering difficulties of it.
But to Tricia's point earlier is, if you don't state that as your vision, then you don't spend the resources advocating and lobbying for that as an outcome, right? And what happens is then Sound Transit says, then WashDOT says, we're leaving our freeway this the way it is. You can put an overcrossing at 12th, and then Sound Transit says, well, we're going to put the train station here because it can't be in the right of way. I mean, so this is where I think having a clear vision can definitely benefit the city.
Yeah, I think
in the long run.
now is the time to say where the preferred station is. That may not be where it shakes out in 20 years. That's fine, but say where it is now, and so that WashDOT and Sound Transit and whatnot make decisions in awareness of that.
Totally agree.
Because we can't have a vision without saying, we think this is where it's going to be, and this is how we're going to accommodate it.
It's a huge, it's definitely the grill in the closet, right? I mean, and to not address it seems hard.
And I think even more important than that is it needs to be very explicitly called out so that the council endorses it. It doesn't matter what we think. What matters is does the council say, yes, this is what the city's official vision is of the light rail station. So I think it also needs to be very clear and called out so that it has the full weight of council behind it.
Well, just as I said, we don't let developers come in and tell us what they're going to do. We tell them what we want them to do. Same thing with DOT and Sound Transit. Mm-hmm. We should tell them what we want, and they should serve us. Don't forget the lid through Mercer Island on I-90, when that was all created, and the beautiful forested overpasses and everything, and the nice sports field complex on the lid. It's $1 billion a mile that DOT spent for that because the city demanded it. So if Mercer Island can do it, so can Issaquah.
I mean, do we want to be that ambitious and start putting some language on that, or is that too greedy?
So yes and no. I mean, I think yes, we need to figure out how to be as smart as we can to write that vision statement that talks about the location and the benefits to our community. But I'm going to tell you that I'm going to guess council's probably not going to want to settle on a transit station location based on what we've done in 2 nights. It's going to probably want to be a little bit of a more protracted process with maybe a few other stakeholders. So what I would say is let's tee this ball up, right? So that the steps, and put some clarity in the implementation piece that says, within the next 2 to 3 years or 2 years. These conversations need to happen. That station needs to land so that this community can get in front of the conversation and not have it be driven by the
To
others.
go back to Lindsay's checklist, I think a checklist is a station location needs to be determined in the short term. The vision is,
And then we might want to put in there, in that requirement, once that decision is made, revisit these 2 neighborhoods that are going to be most related to that.
or one neighborhood.
Or one neighborhood.
I'm also going to suggest that I really like your idea of having all of the urban core as one neighborhood. Which is Sammamish Park, Pickering, Hyla, Tibbetts, and a small section of Gilman. I think it fits.
I'm not sure about Sammamish Park, but let's talk through it.
Okay.
All right, that's on the table.
So you have the train station now. What do you plan on putting in those 2 areas?
So I think from a primary use perspective, I think what we talked about, I think right now Pickering is commercial and retail. And I think that as we talk about areas that can be walkable, that can have all the services in them, clearly for me, Pickering's one of those areas. So what's missing in Pickering is residential. And as we talked about last night, we got a property issue related to that. But assuming we all agree that there should be residential in Pickering, then one of the implementation strategies, one of the successes is to remove the covenant restriction that doesn't allow residential on that property. Because right now, it is not allowed, and it takes 100% of the property owners to agree to allow residential before it can go there. So that's something we'd have to work on. It doesn't happen by itself. And frankly, Lowe's won't do it unless there's a lot of pressure put on them.
And if ST3 is going to put in a light rail somewhere in and around this area, whether it's on the south side with a crossing, that's going to be a magnet for residential, so it would only make sense to put residential in Pickering.
So are you going to specify the amounts or where? Or?
So one of the questions that you guys asked last night, we actually had a great tour, by the way, so for those of you who've scheduled it for next week, hopefully it's as exciting, was, if you, it was capacity, it was a capacity conversation, and that is, if you put, how much residential is realistic to fit in Pickering? How much residential is realistic through Rowley and Tibbetts? And if the answer comes back 7,500 housing units, which is our target for the Regional Growth Center, then I don't think we have to kill ourselves to find residential in all the other areas outside the core, because there's plenty of room in the core, and that could change the conversation a bit, right? Trying to push residential in some of the other places. Now, when you look at places like BMC, and we'll talk about that for those of you who didn't go on the tour, where BMC is on East Lake Sam, there was at least what seemed like consensus last night that residential there made sense. That was a place where, if you could actually improve pedestrian and bike crossing of East Lake Sam to get over to the employment areas, which is where Microsoft and Siemens and the soon-to-be Issaquah School District office space, that all makes sense. That's a horizontally mixed-use neighborhood. It's got a little bit of retail, and maybe that's the piece we focus on. How do we work on that piece?
When we talk about like how much can these regions carry, would it be useful to have any language in the vision about leveraging the light rail station to unlock additional density? Because I think something that when you look at coding that I think is kind of enticing is to structure the code so that you say, okay, we'll allow so much growth because that's as much as the street grid can handle. But once the light rail station opens, that now means that you can move more people in and out on a given day, and the vision would be that you would structure the code so the developer could build something with the idea that when only after this particular event triggers, they know that will then unlock additional coding, and so you can have development built with the idea of like, oh, I'm going to go and add 10 more stories to this building, but only after the light rail station is open, because before that I can't handle the amount of traffic. Would that be something that would be helpful to add?
So I'll kind of go back to something Joe said earlier, because I think it was spot on. I think that right now this community is a little bit freaked out about the density that might be on the wave coming this direction. And so having a conversation about increasing, that density, I don't disagree, AJ. I think that's maybe a conversation that this community might want to have, but maybe like in 10 years.
I think you might be able to use it to counter that concern, because you might tell people, okay, we're going to drop in 7,500 people. At some, between now, 15,000 people, but maybe 5,000 of those people won't show. We won't allow those units to be built until we have this light rail station. And if that light rail station happens in 2035, then we allow those to be built. If it doesn't happen until 2045, we don't. And so you can talk to people and say, okay, that sounds like a lot of people, but by the time all those people show up, we will have X, Y, and Z of additional infrastructure to support that.
Right, but until that extra infrastructure shows up, that's 75,000 people or 7,500 people with more cars on the road, more parking that has to be provided. One of the problems the task force has was we want to look to the future, so builders didn't have to have 3 parking spaces for each unit. Well, how do you do that if you're planning on something that's 30 years away and you're going to start earlier than that? So be careful. Be careful with that, because
for sure. But I think when the task force tackled this previously, you didn't have the guarantee of a light rail station. Now we do, and so I think the vision could articulate that we want the growth to be backloaded.
Well, what do you do in the meantime?
You just don't grow as much.
Well, we throttle it. Okay, but how are you going to throttle it if you're going to start? If you're ultimately looking for 15,000 people, what are you going to put it to? 5, 2?
Well, I think the reality
I don't think you don't. Yeah, but I don't think you have to get into the specifics, because this is only a vision.
Well, you do, because what happens if it all happens in 5 years instead of in 30 years? So that's what happened with us. We figured we had 30 years for this to implement, and all of a sudden, here we are less than 10 years later, and it's been implemented and beyond what we could. So depending on light rail is good, but until you get that light rail, you're going to have people parking and driving, and the congestion is going to get worse and worse.
So I think we need to get a little creative here, because you're onto something where you time the zoning in a way to allow denser urban zoning upon building of the train station.
And you have that on the books, so a developer doesn't build something and then go like, oh, damn, if only I'd known, and if I had waited 8 more years, I could have gotten so much more value out of this land.
They could speculatively approach Lowe's right now today and say, 20 years from now, I could reap a fortune on zoning that allows me to build 200 units an acre or something. But I'm going to have to wait. But I'll make Lowe's an offer today, and then to appease the rest of the community, this is where you get a little creative, you tell the developers, those 200 units, you're going to have to buy the density credits from other neighborhoods that we don't want to develop as densely and as those people want. Maybe they want less density, and who knows?
But I think when it comes back to the vision, as Arthur was saying, I think my vision is that that little pocket where the Lowe's is, while that light rail station is being built, if before the light rail station is being built, I'm fine with that just being a Lowe's. I don't think that needs to turn into anything more beautiful than a Lowe's, because it's in kind of a crappy corner underneath an interstate. What I think my perfect vision is that at the same time that light rail station is being built, that Lowe's is being torn down by some developer, and some much larger building that's hopefully mixed use is being built, and they open it at more or less the same time. I think that's my vision. I think that would be great. So you get to a point that you have an open station and you have a great mixed use neighborhood that's very dense. But before then, you kind of just roll with the existing use, because we don't have the transit infrastructure to get more people in and out of that neighborhood. Which is
great, but the problem is, we put the moratorium in place because we were getting development that we didn't want. And so the lows could develop into something in the meantime, and then we're going to be stuck with it.
Yeah, but you do that by putting in extra requirements, like requiring ground floor retail, requiring 100% structured parking. You put in all these things that we want that's going to cause a developer to be like, well, I'm not going to do all of that and build a 5-story building and have to have 100% structured parking, ground floor retail, because that doesn't make sense in this neighborhood at this time. I think it comes down to a lot of stuff that we were talking about on Mall Street, about being really, really assertive with what we require of the developers. And if the developers say, oh, well, that doesn't pencil out, it's like, all right, okay, we can wait and stick with the existing structures until that pencils out.
So we make progressive coding where the code, we have a timeline. We say this is the code today and this is the code that will be in existence. And when ST3 comes in and they put a station there, this is how this property is going to transform. So everybody has transparency, they see how it's going to work. And in the meantime, we don't get overloaded with a bunch of growth that we can't do anything with.
So Ron, the reason why you have a vision that is implementation agnostic is because of that very reason, right? Is that you never want to lock yourself into certain situations that you don't know will happen. So it has to be very implementation agnostic. What is your, if you had your brothers, you could just do anything, what would you do with Issaquah? Is how you create a vision statement. You cannot have like specifics because they're all contingent on other things happening. See where that will fall apart, right? And then you'll have to that's an implementation plan, and you can adjust your implementation plan, but vision always has to remain kind of the view of what in its wonder what Issaquah looks like.
I was actually thinking of, well, my comment was actually a reflection of what we have today, an amendment to it. And then it would be backed by the code, like what Ken was saying. You have your vision, which is aspirational and kind of guidance, and then you have to build a code around it so that developers have guidance as to what is the expectation and what do I need to do. And then we have city staff that are trained and are strong enough to tell the developer, hey, this is the code, this is the vision, this is what you need to follow, which is actually really just an amendment of what we have here. We just haven't added, I mean, this is Pickering, and what we're talking about doing is probably revamping Pickering. So we probably picked the most difficult thing to start with.
Yeah, but you can. I think you can do that in the vision. You can have for the primary use and in the future state. You can have something that says the vision is that this state will not. Maybe this land use will not change dramatically until.
So think about it in the other direction. So you can say that part of the implementing strategies is, that within, 3 years of the construction of the train station, look at increasing density to this neighborhood to facilitate more TOD development. A measure of success, then, if you're going to do, because there's another layer that we've added to the end potentially, that would be a measure of success would be that area around the train station, within a walking distance of the train station, ends up being the highest density within central Issaquah. That's a vision piece, right? And then you have to say, how do we get there? So that could be. I think one of the things, recognizing time in your meeting, and knowing that we have a couple members of the public that may or may want to say something, I guess the question for you all is looking, there was a conversation about whether or not we want to hang on to 10, or whether we want to look at creating basically a regional growth center neighborhood and periphery, for lack of a better word, at 8:45. So I guess I'm looking for either show of hands or some sentiment from the task force and the commission on which way you'd like to see that. Because what I'd like to do is have us actually share, if we're sticking with 10, at least for now, to share with you this document so you guys can start to actually look at it and make some comments so that when we come in next time, we can kind of hit the ground running. But if the group liked AJ's suggestion that maybe we talk about this as one, then what we would give you is we would kind of put a different construct together and give you that. So it would look a bit different. It would still have the same elements, but geographically, I think it'd be defined differently. And maybe the vision for kind of this central piece of Central Issaquah would be written maybe a little bit different, a little bit more boldly than maybe, say, Old Route 10 and the service area would be.
So if we actually went towards the direction of making it more unified and looking at Pickering and we are talking about making that possibly the highest density, and we're still talking about one, or we're talking about less than 10, but we're talking about, well.
I think the idea is you break it into two themes. You have central Issaquah, the kind of the urban core, and then you have we got to figure out the right word to use it, because it's still urban, it's still Central Issaquah, but it's not as urban. And so then all whether it's the Western Gateway or Old Route 9 or East Lake, they're all in the same tier.
Yeah.
You give them different names for placemaking reasons, and then there's real value to that. But you break it down that you very clearly then have two tiers of development, both still very much still Central Issaquah quality development. So like your Central Issaquah design code still applies to the whole swath, but you clarify that you've got a more urban core, and then the less dense but still urban neighborhoods.
And we could actually put themes there. So,
definitely, yeah.
We could have maybe fewer than 10 and just have neighborhood themes with the same building code or the same type of buildings, but architecturally different.
I think the risk of reducing the quantity of zones is that some zone will actually get lost in the overall.
I think you're right, and I think the way to mitigate that is for the secondary districts, you keep them of the same size, and so that they still get the love, care, and focus that they need. But I think the idea of stitching together Tibbetts and Pickering and perhaps a chunk of Gilman is, I think it makes more sense to think of that as a single neighborhood rather than separate neighborhoods. I think that makes more sense from a planning standpoint. Maybe in the future state, from a placemaking standpoint, you pivot back to them as separate placemakings. But I think from a planning standpoint, I think it makes more sense to plan that as a single neighborhood.
So when you go through this 10, you might find that others stitched together, but I think we have to look at that as individual. Oh yeah, that one goes here. But I do want to give anybody who has anything to say the opportunity to say that. So I'm going to open up the public hearing at 8:55 and ask if anybody would like to come to the podium and make a statement before it gets too late.
Go first, or not at all?
No, I'll just, I don't need to come to the podium, do I have to?
Yes. So you have to tell us who you are and...
We don't make it easy.
No. Oh, sure. Sorry. So I'm John, and I run the Grange and have just about a year and 2 months, and I don't really have anything to say other than I'd love to go on the tour at the next chance. For what it's worth, we've raised wages at the Grange 20% since I started, something that our board and our members have applauded. And as for our future, you were a fuel stop and have been since 1943. So we hope to get through the board to also be an electronic vehicle charging hub somewhere down the road, as we think that probably the stats are in 2022, the internal combustion cars will be the same price as EVs, and they probably already are. And just finally, you can run your green necklace through our yard.
So I have a question for you. So since you're down in that area,
Yeah.
do you see,
We don't consider it down.
so what would you like to see? What would help you in your business, help you?
Well, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, we could use more lighting. We could use sidewalks. It's a bit of a bastard though, because you've got kind of our funky store, and then you've got this fairly modern office doctor complex. Then you've got Boehm's, right? And you almost think like if you could just take that piece out and slide us together, that it would make more sense. So what y'all have is quite a challenge. I think the times that I've winced a little since I took the position is when we talk about Old Town, and I've actually heard people say, because there's a sign that says "Thank you for visiting," like downtown Old Issaquah, and yet on the other side of that sign is Darigold, Boehm's, and the Grange, the oldest businesses in Issaquah. And so I'm not sure you'll be able to do this. And people are like, well, it's just a dairy. Well, it's a dairy with a pretty cool mural, And I've lived here, we moved here in '64, so I'm a Ballard guy, so I love neighborhood. So I think to try to incorporate that into Old Town, although I don't really see exactly how to do it, I think would be nice. We're looking at a really large remodel. The Grange is fine. We have a lot of money in the bank, and we're still doing about $10 million a year. And so I think sometimes about a Grange Village. I think about having there actually be something that's more almost like a livery stable and things like that. I will tell you that probably in the next 2 years we're going to build a barn and do concerts in the barn. But the barn's going to be because we sell tons and tons and tons of hay, and you can't do hay dry, or you can't do hay wet, right? You can't deliver it wet. So we need to have a place where we can pull the semis in, drop off, and pick up hay. So I think it would be great if it were well lit and more walkable, I guess is the short answer. But that's also on us too. It's
I like the coming in with the barn, and I think that when we get the opportunity to talk about that particular neighborhood, now we have something else to put in there, and I've always seen it as a way to get into Old Town, so thank you.
Yeah, and I think finally you talk about in that neighborhood, in the old Route 10 neighborhood, something that's really started to come up, and we just finished expanding it as of today, is we have a community room set off of our offices, and we've knocked out a wall because the community room is too small. And so we've expanded the community room, and probably because of the TV show with the shiplap, we have a barn door that opens the community room. But yeah, that gets used. Everybody from AA to backcountry horsemen use that room, and so in our little neck of the woods, that's become quite the hub, and we support it. We go looking for it, and the Grange really is committed. Our marketing budget's pretty much all community giving now, so we're really trying to hub up.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Would anybody else like to give us their thoughts?
You guys have it. Yeah, no way. Okay, David Kapler, right here. I walked to the Grange, but I missed your bulk winter cover crop seeds in bulk bins for that. But.
It's back.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
It's back in gardening. Yeah.
Okay, all I saw was everything in bags. Okay. Thank you. Grange is cool. Okay, from San Francisco, Connie. Doesn't believe the slope behind Home Depot should be in the Central Issaquah plan. And she doesn't think the state park should be in the Central Issaquah plan. Mary made bunch of comments in red, and a lot of them were about wildlife corridors. we're going to have wildlife through this town. With the state park with the hundreds of acres there and what's going to end up in the state park. It was just 10 days ago, a cougar was killed on Highlands Drive between the hospital and I-90, somewhere on there.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not.
I could.
Yeah. So, you know.
I drove past it like 2 minutes after it happened. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
I mean, so, you know, they're traveling through. It was in the evening, right? It was after the Bergsma meetings, I believe. So
Yeah, it was
it
like
happened later.
8 o'clock.
But they move around. We know that. They've seen them in the cameras that Matt has had at Issaquah High School, behind Issaquah High School and Park Point, and bears and the rest. But so let's be sure we recognize wildlife will be there. They love the creeks, the Tibbets and Issaquah Creek. They're going to be there, and let's make sure keep them as safe as possible. You know, the vision, there's a lot of good discussion on vision. Vision, you know, we could have the best vision in the world, and unless we have the codes, the regulations, and the policy, we're going to just have more disasters. So I'm concerned the moratorium's almost done with, right? I don't know if the council will, you know, extend a little bit more, but there's, you know, you can only do that till be a year, so I'm not sure how much more they want to keep going or can keep going. So when it gets right down to this thing, the test is right now, or when you're finished your process, the moratorium's over, the developer from HE Double Toothpicks, as my students used to say, you know, will they decide, I don't want to deal in this place, or it's going to be tough to deal with. Issaquah is going to be, you know, really expecting high expectations, and I'm going to have to do a great job, and I can do it here. I mean, we are a world-class area. The whole world is looking at us. I mean, we're one of the fastest growing areas in the country. The economics here is obscene, and in terms of house values and the rest, they're all looking at us, and we want the best to come, and we want to be able to make sure the best do their best, and not the worst come to do their worst. Thank you. Whoops.
I could ask if anybody else wants to speak, but seeing nobody, I'm going to close the public hearing at 9:05. And continue it on the 30th, right?
I'd like to bring up an idea, though, between now and the 30th that I'd like staff to look at, if possible, is reducing the number of districts, rather than come back to the 30th and talk about it. If it's something you would, because you talked, Keith, about ideas, raise hands or whatever, and I'd like to reduce it to four districts or 4 neighborhoods. And if it's possible to pull up this central area zoning map, would be the easiest to show it on.
I can do that. I got it.
This is a test, Keith.
I got the URL.
It's just a test.
Though I think I still agree with the point that John had made, that I want to make sure that the secondary neighborhoods don't get too big, that you're still not able to make the placemaking that needs to make sense. 4 just feels a little too small. But we'll talk through it.
I wonder if it's possible to do placemaking separate from neighborhoods.
Zoning, right?
Ooh, how'd you get here? I should be following.
Placement should be in the neighborhood, right?
Well, but
Yeah, but how'd you get there?
if we end up
Just search
with,
static maps.
you know, like
Development services
2 ideas
maps, static
of
maps.
urban core
Development services,
and periphery,
Okay.
Map, static maps.
So
then we could end up having those as district neighborhoods.
Yeah, I almost wonder
I
if
know.
it becomes
I know.
districts as kind of the higher level, and then neighborhoods are kind of these.
Yeah, or even just the idea of, you know, within this central Issaquah area, being able to say, okay, we've got a map of the overarching green necklace. We've got a map of the well-known places that are and our vision of what they should be. And then these are kind of the zones, the urban core and the periphery.
Okay, so here's what my thought was.
Yeah.
So number 1 would be urban core, and Jerry, if you can kind of show that.
Jerry?
Jerry.
Wow.
Keith.
Wow.
I'm sorry. I still confuse you.
Wow. So urban,
It's the
I
salmon,
did this
right?
twice though, okay?
So
Third
urban,
time I owe you money.
yeah, urban core is red.
He did a lot of presentations to the DC.
Salmon.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be red, but it's
So-
more salmony. So that's, yeah, urban core. And that's regional growth center too. So there's, so there's that piece of this, that's also the regional growth center.
So it's that urban
Oh,
core.
that's convenient.
That urban core and Hyla, right? So Hyla next to it.
So Hyla is right here.
You would include that?
So that's
So-
under the Raleigh Development Agreement.
So that's
that's a
all
really good
urban zoning right now.
What map is that?
It's whatever.
Never seen it before in my life.
Yep,
Never.
she's in the plan.
Central Issaquah plan.
Oh, you want to go to?
No, it's not in the,
It's
Oh,
the
where
name,
is it?
it's the land use, are you in the land use map?
Yeah.
That's how I read it was.
You could just
Yeah,
use my
because you think
URL.
you need a neighborhood that has coherent boundaries, but that was the point I was trying to make, that like, I don't want like 90.
It's in the plan though, right?
I wanted to
And
be
it's the
something that we-
plan, not the
something that we
district?
aspire
Is it the
to-
district?
to
Is it,
overcome.
oh, you're in the regional
She's
growth
in the-
center.
No, she's in the plan. She's in
She's in the plan?
And it's voucher numero, what is it?
Exhibit 4 on page 32 or 34.
made a comment earlier.
Loading.
Bigger neighborhoods, and we have higher density in places like Pickering, and we can reduce
Density.
density in other places.
Exactly.
Gilman.
no, so but that's not the plan.
That's CRGC, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the regional growth center. It's in the Central Issaquah zoning map that you can find, but I can explain it from here. So
Good,
the-
because I don't want to pull up another tab. I'm just kidding.
So the red color and Hyla are both urban zoning. That's the urban core, and those should be, in my mind, have the same vision to eventually be developed. If we didn't have I-90 going through it, that would be the urban core of the city. Gateway would be its own district because it really is stuck out there by itself. And I don't think we need to concentrate a lot on it because there's not much else that's going to happen there in the next 30 years. The purple color is all the mixed-use zoning. And I think all that can be essentially one neighborhood because it's not urban core, but we do want mixed use. We want residential, we want jobs, we want retail. The lower left portion, sort of the red checks portion below.
Down here?
Down there. So that's the urban residential or village residential kind. I think that can be its own vision area district because would almost go down into Old Town, but I think it could stand alone on itself. And then the other two would be Old Town Historic District, Highway
Route
10.
Yeah.
And I think that could go into Old Town Issaquah. I don't think it fits in the urban vision we're talking about. Move that into Old Town. And then the service district, you can even take out of the Central Issaquah plan.
Agreed.
Yeah. So we get down to 4, just the urban, the mixed use, gateway, and then
And then we have 2 boundary changes.
You could actually.
and the residential.
Yeah.
Gateway doesn't even need to be part of the center.
And then we reduce density.
With Gateway, I would like to keep it because that is our gateway and defining it. And so
I
you're
don't think it
forgetting.
is anymore.
What you're forgetting is we also talked about the need for conductivity to the park and other things, and so a bridge over.
Yeah, 'cause you still have
And we need parks. So you've already already developed that, but to stick it out there is sticking it out and just an orphan.
And let's make them tear down an apartment.
Because there's still a lot that can be done
Yeah.
with the rebuild the Newport Way, with the bridge over 90. Even though there might not be many new buildings built, I think there's a lot of stuff that's involved in the vision.
I hadn't looked at it this way, but I mean, realistically, zoning drives whatever happens on the land way more than any vision we may come up with. The zoning is what determines price, value, and what you can do.
Height, density.
So it makes perfect sense to align the visions to the zoning mean. I guess
Shouldn't the zoning be aligned to the visions?
Yes.
Agreed.
We're doing it backwards, but there's still a connectivity.
But there is connection there.
But it kind of worked.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, it's close to, the existing zoning is close to what we kind of have a consensus could generally be the vision. So.
And then I think really then the discussion is, does our vision want to tweak the zoning at all? Do we want to turn some salmon purple or some purple salmon or something like that? I think that's in the question. I think I like the idea of those road districts, and then I think maybe at the next meeting, we should have a little bit of discussion about, okay, do we disagree slightly where the zoning switches?
Because it'll be so the vision of the new districts or neighborhoods could then inspire a zoning change conversation.
Absolutely.
But let's do it that way as opposed to the other way.
If we do that, looking at Gilman and Old Town, can we reduce density requirements, which would be what, down zoning then? Or would we leave the zoning as it is and put that density in the urban core, like the Pickering area where we have even higher density? And that way we actually allow the others portions of the city to breathe.
Maybe, because I think if I look at that front street as you get to Old Town, I think there's still plenty of room for that to grow. It just needs to grow in a way that transitions very organically to Old Town.
So why don't we look at that? But my guess is that the zoning that's in place on those two neighborhoods was not necessarily an upzone when it got added into Central Issaquah.
He's talking about Gilman, the red check.
Oh, this area?
Yeah, that checked area.
Okay.
So is that considered high density now, or is that, so if we actually just...
It's mixed-use residential that can go to 65 feet.
Yeah, that's a lot different than garden apartments.
Yeah, so maybe moving that out of the CIP or leave it in the CIP. Well, see, if we have it in the CIP, then that means it's going to be higher density, right? So
could be.
The idea is if we put more of the density in, we concentrate density.
But Ron, I think we are doing that.
I think the suggestion was to make that its own neighborhood. I think we can then talk about next time, if that's the consensus of a majority of the group, I think staff can go repackage this up that way. Then we can have a conversation about that neighborhood, and we'll figure out what name it is, because the one that staff has is not very glamorous. And so we can then talk about the density and look at zoning for that zone and say, okay, now that we've created that as a neighborhood, here's what the zoning regs would allow there. Does that still make sense, or does that not make sense? And we can have that conversation. Yeah.
And I like where you're going. It's where I was going too, which is, if we would have had creative policies in place that said, we don't really want 400 units at the gateway parcel, why don't we let high-density area owners or future owners buy some of those 400 units and transfer them into the high-density area and leave 100 units on gateway? And then that way, everybody's still made whole, but we're not giving free density, which
Or just zone it that way in the first place.
Nobody should get free zoning that makes them instant multimillionaires just because you happen to own a property. We should make them buy the density from other parcels where we don't want that growth to go. And it's happening everywhere. That's why we get all screwed up in our building and developments, because we hand out free zoning like candy, because people, of course, want it so they can become an instant multimillionaire. I've seen it over and over.
Keep that thought. I know you've all talked about, let's put all this density in those two areas. But, I don't turn it off, how does it go off? There's a limit to what you can put in there, realistically. And so you're going to have to spread some of this out if you want to get it in.
Agreed.
So just saying putting it in there is not going to work.
No, I agree.
And so it's getting to be a little late. And I think you've just given Keith and Trish some things to do to prepare for the next meeting. And I think that we'll all be more prepared if, we're kind of, you talk and you talk about this vision and that vision, you finally come to a conclusion. I think we're in a point where we're going to go on and actually get into it. My only concern is getting realistic zoning in place so that builders know what they can build, what we want as a city. And I think that's extremely important. And that's great. You look at that and say, okay, we're going to put all the residential in there, but how are we going to do it? What are the requirements that we're going to put in? What kind of areas are you going to put in for roads and the green necklace? All that can be put into this when they get enough time and staffing to put it all together. But with that, I'd kind of like to say that, we've talked about it for enough tonight, and I think we need some rest here. And I think we will continue on.
The possibility of a meeting tucked in between the 30th and today, like after the tour on Thursday, the 16th, to meet. We couldn't have this room, but we could find a room.
Do you think that you want to
That would be Thanksgiving.
have two
No,
meetings?
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, turkey will be provided.
No, they were saying on the 16th.
On the 16th, so that there'd be the tour for those of you that didn't go on the tour, and then, we'd have like pizza or something, and then have a meeting
Well, I mean,
to,
well, if there's food involved.
just to try to get farther so that you don't think that you have to have everything done on the 30th, because
Is anybody available on the 16th?
I'm available. I was planning on going on the tour that day, so.
right, so it would
I
just be.
could probably
back
do
to
it,
the
but I don't know if I could do the tour and then the meeting.
Yeah,
So I
that's,
might have to choose.
that's a lot.
Too much
No,
FaceTime.
that meeting was, the tour was 2 hours.
Right.
So,
I drove so
so,
I think that's too much. I think for
Okay.
those of us that are going on the tour.
okay, so, after talking,
Do we want to make a choice? Which one's more important?
Well, I haven't been on the tour yet, so.
the tour is extremely.
Yeah, I think we still want to do the tour.
It really is more important to discuss
Self-tour.
the rest of the zoning here.
Kind of defeats the
And is it
purpose,
worth it
'cause
to
I've
try
already
to find
been to all the
another
places.
night that's not a Thursday and not Thanksgiving? To try to get people back together to talk about it? Or do people think that they'll be fine on the 30th?
I think we've got to a point where we can take it to where we need to go and then say, staff, this is what we want. You write up the code to make it happen. I don't think we can do that. We can tell you what we want, how we want it, or would like to have it. And maybe at that point in time, you can go on. So
I think as long as we have something from you guys beforehand, if the ask from you guys to us is do some wordsmithing on this and come with your proposals, then we can be more actionable at that point.
Okay.
I mean,
As
I'd
long
love
as
to
you-
fit something in,
As long
but-
as you decide that you're not going to get off track and go back to the vision and go back to this, that we actually have to focus on either connecting the groups or keeping them 10 or whatever you want to do, but let's do that.
I think the fact that we made some good recommendations on
Yeah.
bringing it 10 down and then also what should be included in it, I think we might be able to do it.
We could, we'll just, if we stay longer than 9:30, man, that you'll be expecting that you're going to stay longer than 10:30, and you agree to that. It's either that or another meeting.
So we're asking the city to actually take some of the ideas we have, put them into a proposal to present to us so that we can talk about it and then make a decision or tweak it.
Yes.
I think we go with just one meeting, and that's my request.
Okay, well, that's what I'm getting at. We'll just, but tonight, I think that we have
We're done.
talked about it enough, so I'd kind of like to close the meeting at
Sure. And I would say, too, that the Central Issaquah plan is really short for a plan, and I would recommend, if anyone haven't read it in a while, the whole first part is the intro about the task force and why it is the way it is. Not why the task force was what it was, but all the work that you did and all the outreach and why it came to be that that's the boundary. And it talks all about sustainability and mountains to sound. And so it's just a good refresher to help ground the next revisit of the visions, to maybe give that another look.
I know we could all find ourselves, but could you include
I
it
could
as an
send the- I
appendix?
could send
And the
the
next
link,
one as a
yeah.
reminder for us to look?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will.
I don't want to downgrade all of the effort and time that the task force put into this. I mean, there were reasons behind what they talked about, and there was a group of 20? 12?
Seemed like
That put in a lot of time and a lot of discussion on this, so I
Yeah,
don't
they
want to
worked
say
really
that,
hard.
we're going to,
And actually, we flailed around for the first few meetings until
Well, of course.
it did kind of all come together about the third or fourth meeting. And
that's
then we
kind of like
really
what we
moved ahead.
just did tonight, actually.
We flail.
Okay, so I am going to call the meeting close at 9:25. Thank you so much.
Can we, or will we, at next meeting, we